Hello and welcome to our live stream, wherever you are in the world, Formula One fans, whatever time zone you're in, the beauty of the internet. Great to have you as part of the show. Well, the main part of the show. Thank you for being with us. Yeah, 10 days or so to go until the Canadian Grand Prix. It's a bit weird, isn't it? We had that long break in April and then we had the Miami Grand Prix. Very good. Now we want to get on with the season. And then there was another hiatus. Anyway, means that the teams have even more time to prepare, I suppose. And as I speak, there's another email that was sent out late last week by the FIA talking about the Formula One regs, basically saying that they're pretty happy with everything as it went in Miami. And I guess that they talked about the start and various other things to be looking at, but I guess they'll be ratifying that electric power boost that they've been talking about sooner rather than later. And nothing significant other than that going forward into 27, they're thinking about giving more ICE, internal combustion engine power, and less electric. In other words, they're feeling that they did get the balance a bit over the top, 50-50. And it's already less than that now, and they're going back even further, which I think most of us could have told them in the first place. But anyway, a little bit like groove tyres, as I've always said, why do we need to have groove tyres in Formula One? Nobody seemed to complain. They were absolutely terrible. And then when Max finally did quietly withdraw them from the regs, Max Mosley that is, not Max Verstappen, there were no apologies either for messing up Formula One for a couple of years. So we might be, that's how 2026 is a little bit like that. We had this going into the start of the year, this, massive thing with electrification, and now backing away from it. And that's not really good enough, is it? I mean, there are enough good, brilliant people in Formula One, whether you're talking Formula One teams, whether you're talking the FIA, as limited as they are relative to the teams, and of course in Liberty. So yeah, well, let's hope from here on in it'll be pretty stable and we can get on with some real motor racing. The first sign of which we really saw in Miami, which was very good. Yeah, quite a lot going on at the moment. Where were we at the weekend? Oh yeah, we were up at the Gulf actually, where a friend of ours, Alejandro Del Rey, who we've known for many years now since he was in the Challenge Tour, finished third in the Catalunya Open, which was really good. Followed him for 2 days. Long way off the winner, but that was an exceptional performance by that young South African, and that was great to see. But a good chat with Alex afterwards about rallying and Suarez and all the things. There's a great blend now between golfing and motorsport, isn't there? We see it with McLaren, we see it with Red Bull, and lots of chat about Formula One there at the Gulf. Obviously, the Spanish Grand Prix. We stayed right in the hotel, right by the Barcelona circuit where I used to stay when I was at Williams. And yeah, they were getting ready for the MotoGP race and, of course, for the Grand Prix. Bit of a rivalry now between Madrid and Barcelona. And I think Barcelona has, as a result of that, has found some new backing in the whole Catalonia region. And it's looking pretty good there. Very good indeed. We had the Rally of Portugal as well. What an event that was. And I make no apologies, again, of running a bit of excellent video that comes from them. Terry Neuville finally found that on the gravel, the Hyundai i20 wasn't that bad, and he was relatively competitive. The quick Toyota was still Ollie Solberg. You can see their characteristic mouth open. But look here, he catches some sort of bedrock on a jump. It's a massive moment. He's still freaking around with the gears to get the thing going. But that cost him a little bit. And I think he backed off a bit after that. Yeah, classic, great TV, isn't it? There's Terry doing one of the jumps in the Hyundai. Great to see that car going well again. A Toyota, very, very quick as well. And Sebastian Ogier driving beautifully, very, very quick. But here was John Armstrong in one of the Pumas, the M Sport Pumas, gets a bit sideways, hits the thing, and well, look at this. Whoa, there's the safety survival cell for you in the cockpit. Nobody hurt at all. That's just amazing, isn't it? Very cool, calm, roll the thing, no problem. Sami Pahari also quick in the Toyota, but look at this. That's why I just love watching this footage. It's so cool. He got away with that. And then we got into the final Sunday when packed crowds, as I say, Sebastian Ogier, very, very quick, really was going to win it. But then look what happens here, gets a puncture. And a little bit like Terry in in the when he crashed in that last stage in previous rallies, but they have to get out and change it. And here's Terry Neuville now, making no mistakes, finally, with victory in sight. A lot of rain, a lot of mud, but the Hyundai looking really good on the gravel and the loose. He and Martin Vidaga due for some decent results for a change. And incredibly, really, against all expectations, it came in Portugal. So good luck to them. Very good performance. Next round of the Rally Championship, World Rally Championship, is in Japan on tarmac, narrow roads, warmer weather because it's in the middle of the year. Normally it's in the winter, and probably Toyota will be very, very quick there. But yeah, very good rally, and big thanks to WRC for that excellent. I just wish. It's, what can I say? I just wish we could do that with Formula One and Formula 2 and Formula 3 and a lot of other stuff as well. And these days, everybody's so paranoid about rights and everything else. And I was actually just on that subject. I was watching a vid yesterday with interview with Bryson DeChambeau, who's, I don't know if you're not following golf, it's still quite interesting because the Saudi Arabians started this breakaway group in golf. It could well happen in Formula One at some point, of course, called Live. And Bryson DeChambeau, one of the biggest stars of golf, decided to go with them very quickly. And now, in the last month, after 4 or 5 years of bleeding money, the Saudis have realized they don't really want to do this anymore, and they're pulling out. And the interview to Bryson was, are you now going to go back to the PGA Tour, the normal tour? And he made out that, well, he said, and he confirmed that doing his YouTube videos, and he's got a very, very big YouTube channel now where he does weird things like if he can break, if he can use a children's set of clubs, or if he shoots off the red tees, the women's tees, can he break 50 around 18 holes, things like that. It's a lot of viewers. And he said, well, because the PGA Tour won't allow me to do videos on the sort of Wednesday or Thursday before a tournament, sorry, the Tuesday or Wednesday before a tournament, I may not do it. And I thought, well, it's pretty similar to Formula One. I mean, there's no way you could start filming any driver, whether it be Lando Norris or Max Verstappen, start filming YouTube videos at a racetrack on a Wednesday or Thursday, because the rights are held by the rights holders, which are sold by F1, and there's no way you can do that. And it was quite interesting. Years ago, I was when the drones became quite popular. Well, they are popular now, of course, but when drones became a thing, I was sort of nudging around thinking, well, I wonder whether it's worth trying to do some drone footage of Formula One, over the paddock or whatever on a Thursday. And I was told in no uncertain terms that Bernie Ecclestone, this was the Bernie era, that Bernie owned, and Formula One owned, the aerial rights to Formula One up to some unbelievable thing, 100,000 feet or something. Okay, won't go near that one. So that was that. Another thing that captured my interest was well, I'll show you. It's this podcast, the Dorkomotive podcast. I was listening to it the other day in the car, driving up to Barcelona, actually. Brian Loans. Really, really good. He's a technical guy, American, and fascinated by all things motor racing, plus aerospace, plus other stuff. Great. I really recommend his podcast. It's very, very good. And he's got a great podcast out at the moment, well, one I was listening to anyway, about the Mickey Thompson 67 IndyCar. I don't know if you know anything about that, but here it is. Here's a picture of it. And it's it is the most unusual race car of all time, I think, because and we often get questions on the live stream about, six-wheel Tyrrells and Brabham fan cars and this and that. Six-wheel Williams as well, which were banned. But this car, look at that. It's front-wheel drive. Well, so for its front engine, first of all. Look where the driver's sitting almost over the rear axle. That's Sammy Sessions. Drove it, raced it, tried to race it at Indy, didn't qualify. Front-wheel drive. But look at the rear axle. Rear-wheel steering. Rear-wheel steering, front-wheel drive, front-engined, 5-litre Chevy V8, very light, which also Mickey Thompson did the engine himself. And the car was built by Joe Haffiker, but designed by Mickey Thompson, who was famous in America for many years as the first American to break 400 miles an hour at the Bonneville Salt Flats, land speed record holder. And he was incredibly innovative. of course, there was a huge shadow over his name after the '64 Indy 500 shunt, triggered really by Dave McDonald in the Mickey Thompson car. But as Brian points out in the podcast, no defence of that, but the regulations changed on wheel size from '63 to '64, which made that '64 car much more unwieldy, and that was one of the reasons that the very talented Dave McDonald lost control of that. Anyway, I thought you'd like to see that, because in terms of innovation, I would say innovation always, I suppose the true sense of innovation is that it actually triggers something for the future. I'm not sure that triggered much. Front wheel drive, maybe. I guess he was lured in by the success of the Minis and the Monte Carlo Rally at that point. Rear wheel steering. Yeah. I remember doing a day with Nigel Mansell at Honda in Swindon in England, circa 85, I guess. And it was the rear wheel steering Honda Prelude, launch thereof. And Nigel was there doing a demo of it, but they had sort of cones in the car park there, just as, doing it as a weave. And he completely lost it in the middle, just completely lost it. And he said, I don't want to drive this thing again, completely forget it, And I think the same could be said probably for this car. I can't imagine what that would have been like going around Indy. You can see it's sort of got opposite lock on the rear axle already. Can you believe that? Anyway, in looking for that picture, and big thanks to the Henry Ford for that. Also, I came across this. This is the Rob Wilson philosophy of this is why Wikipedia and the internet is not as good as encyclopedias, because the whole point of going through books is that you find lots of interesting stuff on the way, whereas the internet just takes you straight to your target, well, in theory. And that's why we still love books. And that's why going through these archives, I loved it as well, because I came across this photograph, 67 Indy testing, I guess, not even qualifying. And that is the Mallard, which is the last, in '68, it became the last front engine car to qualify for the Indy 500. It actually didn't qualify in '67, interestingly enough. That's its creator and driver on the left with the helmet, Jim Hurtubise. In the cockpit, and the reason I love this photograph is a number of people are fascinated by it. In the cockpit, of course, is Colin Chapman, who's trying to work out where the gear shift is and how to get his feet on the pedals, I guess. On the right is Jochen Rindt, who was attempting to qualify for Indy that year. This is '67 and didn't. And as I mentioned, a lot of it was nausea in case of Jochen going around Indy, which was the prelude to the nausea he would feel in Formula One at circuits like Clermont-Ferrand in '70, when he went to a fully faced helmet for the first time. Hand on the rollover bar is Dan Gurney, looking at it all. And on the left there, scratching his head, is Jackie Stewart. I mean, it's pretty impressive, isn't it? And that's, I don't know whether that's, am I being a bit over romantic here and saying, isn't it nice how much interest everybody took of everybody's cars in those days? Jackie sat in the car, Jochen sat in the car, everybody loved it. And they're all mates of Jim Hurtubise. So I came across that picture, thought you'd like that. And then finally yesterday, we had a question in a live stream last week about Australians that have tried to come over and didn't make it, and how tough it is for Australians. One of the most talented Australians of all time, in my opinion, is Frank Matic. I took that pic of him at Warwick Farm in '68, just after he'd won the 69, actually. It was a big sport, I think it's Australian Sports Car Championship, and there's Frank waving, but incredibly talented. I only put it in because yesterday was the anniversary of his passing, about I think 11 years ago now. I really miss Frank, and if he'd come over and seriously done Formula One, I've no doubt he would have been very, very successful, very successful. And two other Australians. I mean, there are so many, actually, if I think about how many Australians tried to come to Europe and did it, and sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. The two I'd just like to give a special mention to, and there are many others as well, and I'll keep doing this probably every live stream, but Vern Schuppen is another one that I just like to mention. Came over unbelievably quick in a former Atlantic Palliser in 1971, and just great car control, but smooth, really, really good, and was all set for a pretty good Formula One career with BRM in '72 when he got gazumped by Niki Lauda, effectively. I mean, Niki was at March, but then he very quickly got into the BRM thing for '73, and Vern's Formula One career sort of went sideways after that. because he wasn't as clever as Nicky at raising money from the banks in Austria. But Vern went on to have a very successful career in Formula 5000. Dan Gurney thought very highly of him, and also big sports cars, obviously Porsches in Japan and all over the world. So Vern is one guy that did make it really in the end, but it was a big, tough struggle. And another Australian I'd just like to mention, because why not? You know, when is another time appropriate for this? Is Tony Alcock, who I got to know in Australia in the very late 60s, early 70s, when he started to build his own Formula Ford cars called Baranas. There's an Australian name, Barana, mate, yeah. But beautifully built, very nice. And he came over to England and we chatted a bit, and he really, all he wanted to do was get into Formula One. And he got a job with Graham Hill, and he was doing a really good job. And I think that 75 Embassy Hill would have been a very good car. And you know, and he died in the plane crash with Graham. So, you know, right at the beginning of his career, really. And I always think about Tony Alcock and what a wasted talent that was. Many others too, you know, Dave Wass and sorry, not Dave Wass, others that went, Tony Bryce, obviously, and Graham, and yeah. So just wanted to mention Tony Alcock and the Barana, and I'm sure there are some Baranas racing in Australia still. Anyway, that's the start of the show. So don't forget, if you've got a spare 30 minutes and you think, oh, what am I going to do now? Just have a look at that Dorkomotive podcast. There's a lot going on there. Right, let's have a look at your questions and comments. Peter, this is from Sarosh. Hi, Sarosh, another of our regulars, and welcome to the show. I was watching the 2006 Imola Grand Prix with Michael and Alonso racing. Surprise for me was Michael most of the time had an overlap of throttle and brakes. Alonso didn't. Must say Michael's defense was superb. Yeah, I mean that was a classic race of how defense can be as enthralling as attack. Don't tell the statisticians who love to talk about the number of overtakes you have per race in Formula One, or indeed the rule makers. But I've always maintained defense, and epitomized by Michael there was, you know, was absolutely it was just a brilliant race from beginning to end. It's an interesting comment you make about Michael. I always felt that Michael was incredibly clean in terms of overlap and very good. That's not to say that he didn't brake against throttle. Of course he did. He left foot braked, but he is one of the few drivers that's perfectly been able, particularly in that era, to use that as balance without slowing the car down. And that was what Michael was doing there. He was showing his skill, really, his footwork, and how good he was in that race. But I don't think Michael was ever guilty of over braking with the left foot and therefore slowing the car down. He was exceptionally good in that area. Another one from Sarosh. Hi, Peter. GP was driving a lap in the simulator with Max guiding him. What struck me was quickly Max told him to upshift. It was almost as if there was no engine braking and the car was running away. Yeah, well, that's interesting that you point that out. I mean, it kind of underlines the general theorem that great drivers, if they're left in a choice between a high gear or a low gear, will always go for the lower gear because everything's a bit softer and a bit calmer. And thinking about it, just on that comment now, I think, you know, when we started to see in the Bahrain test that one of the quick ways of getting this energy deployed or harvested was to sort of go back through the gears at quite high revs, going into, say, turn 10 in Bahrain. And I said at the time, you know, Max isn't going to like that. He was one of the first guys doing it. We know that, but it's not part of his DNA to drive that way. I mean, he'll always want to be in a lower gear if he can. And I suspect, actually, now there's less power out there. I suspect now that's another reason these new regs have sort of gravitated a little bit towards Max's style. Not style, Max's flow of driving. Because there isn't so much need to have to sort of really rev the thing and hold these long gears. And he can start to short shift. And one of the best moments of any Grand Prix for me, or any time in practice even, is to be on board with Max when he's just driving out of the pits and out of the pit lane, and just to listen to his gear changing and the sequence of his gear changing as he's accelerating once he gets out of the speed limit area. And I love that because it's always, you know, and things vibrating away, and that Red Bull powertrain Ford sounds a little bit like, you know, a rusty old tractor from the barn when it's off cam, if that's the right word. I don't know what these engines can be these days when they're not, you know, then he's not on it at all. It's just going down the pit lane. It's and then he gets out of the pit lane thing and he starts accelerating. It's but then it's incredible how quickly he's going through the gears. You go bah, 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 and he just does that all the time. He very quickly likes to get in as long a gear as he can straight away. I just love that moment. I'm sure other drivers do the same, but not all. A lot of them like to feel that. Pierre Gasly's one likes to feel that surge of acceleration. Max is just like, bah, 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 okay, I'm there now, and I'll think about the lap. And it's just a different way of doing it. But it's an interesting comment you make there. Another one, Sarosh. And I'm giving you lots of time because you are a channel member. And while we're on that subject, we'll be doing another of our live chats starting half an hour before the Canadian Grand Prix. Late at night here in Europe, but it'll be okay. 4 members, so looking forward to that very much. And if you haven't yet joined, it's your choice. Obviously, we'd love to have you on board, and we'll be doing lots of content like this and that throughout the year. Very simple, just press the join tab by our videos, and Bob's your uncle. So, Peter, Senna outqualified Prost by 1.4 in Monaco. People talk a lot about it. Mansell outqualified Prost by 1 second in England. Not many talk about it, at least not to the same intensity. No, I know. Why is that? I don't really get that. You know, and no one will persuade me that Senna was any better than Mansell around Monaco, even though Nigel never won the Monaco Grand Prix. And Jim Clark never won the Monaco Grand Prix. So, you know, what does that tell you? It's just a lot of things need to come into place at Monaco. And Nigel should have won it in 87 and he should have won it in 92. Both occasions, just stupid things going wrong. But anyway, it's beside the point. And why people talk more about Monaco and Prost. I suppose because, you know, it went on to be parlayed into a great race. Whereas at Silverstone, Nigel's race ended in retirement at Copse Corner, famously throwing his gloves into the crowd. So maybe there's a bit of that. Maybe Monaco's a bit more photogenic anyway for that. And the onboards mean more to people when they watch them, things like that. But yeah, I agree with you, you know, and I made that point in the last live stream. I think Nigel's qualifying lap in the British Grand Prix 1990 just basically said everything you need to say about his pace compared with Alan Prost. Just amazing. Drew, hi mate, another of our members. Thank you very much indeed. Peter, hope you're well. When they change from 7 megajoules to 8 megajoules qualifying to race, what do the teams use during practice? Do they practice with 8 or 7? The switching back and forth is a mess. Yeah, it seems to me as if they're using the lower one because there was a lot of, are we allowed to call it super clipping anymore? I don't know. There was a lot of backing off 2/3 of the way down the straight in free practice at Miami. And then it kind of went away when they went into sprint qualifying. So it seemed to me as if that's what they were doing. They were using only 7 in free practice. But it's a good question, and I'll make a note of it to ask Mark, and we'll have a look in Canada and see what they do. It is a lot of switching back and forth. It is a mess, and it's difficult to understand. And wouldn't it be great if we had a graphic on screen which told us exactly what megajoule that car was running on that lap? Because it's quite significant. If you're looking at lap times, it's no less or more significant than are they on new tires or old, light fuel or heavy, you know, all the things that are significant we need to know. And whether they're running full power or not is another thing. So there you go. Drew says, Peter, please take a drive to Madrid so you can show us the track. If that thing will be ready on the internet, it still looks dusty. Well, what I'll do there, if he's watching, Diego Marino, my mate, who lives in Madrid. And I've got to press pause here because Diego, very sweetly, bless him, has just sent me another amazing model. It is, ta-da, Jack Brabham's 1966 championship winning BT19 Repco V8. Yeah, there you go. It's sharp now. Just a beautiful model. Again, even down to the tiny little logo that he, next to the Brabham name, that he had at the British Grand Prix in the Alton Park Gold Cup, but not at other races. Little logo of a man with a checkered flag. The little lettering, the design was patent pending. Whether they achieve that, I need to find out from David Brabham whether that actually happened. But thank you so much, Diego. What a beautiful car. And I love that Brabham when I first saw it at Warwick Farm in '67 in the hands of Denny Hulme. But already then they'd changed, the Repco engine had already changed its config. And if we can get the focus right again, maybe if I put it in front of me. Anyway, you can probably see, oh yeah, there you go. The exhausts are out the side at the moment, but for '67, the manifolds came out between the two V's of the engine. They changed the V angle, went out, and the exhaust came out in the middle, and it was just a glorious car. And I remember arriving in the paddock there in '67. Denny may well have been in that chassis actually, and they had that new engine in that chassis. And he was helping them push it off the back of the little Brabham Holden transporter and helping with the mechanics set it all up. And I just watched, I was transfixed for like an hour watching him do that. Beautiful car. Beautiful car. Thank you very much, Diego. Anyway, getting back to the point, Diego has sent lots of pictures of this Mad Ring thing being built. I say thing because it's an odd name. We'll get used to it, I suppose. A and B, it's got this absurd bank corner, which I'm not a fan of, because the whole point of Formula One is braking and cornering compared with other forms of motorsport, and to see them go around corners. And if you just put bank corners there, what does that do? It's just flat out, probably. What does that achieve? Just reduces it to all the other forms of motorsport. I just don't get it. Oh, it's spectacular. Looks great on TV. Okay, all right, okay. Anyway, Diego, will you please do that? Take a drive, do a, PO view, fully sideways, of course. Lots of dust spraying up either side. Handbrake turns around the new Madrid circuit. That would be great. Thank you. Peter, do you think science can go back to McLaren? Uh, uh, well, for him to go back, yeah. I mean, I think possibly, yeah. I think maybe Zach would do that if Oscar went somewhere else. But wouldn't he look at Leo Fornero? I would hope he'd look at Leo. I mean, what's the point of being a McLaren Academy driver, having won the F2 championship, and F3, I think, didn't he? And not get an opportunity. But yeah, if he's around, I guess he might take him back. Be a good team, no doubt about that. Carlos and Lando, good combination in terms of personalities and, glad, happy around the campfire. But two wide-ish turn-in drivers, I wonder if they're thinking at McLaren, if we do lose Oscar, we've got to get an early turn-in guy, short corner driver. Let's look at them out there. Do you think they're thinking that way? I doubt it. Speaking of which, I had a long chat to Rob Wilson, a shortish chat actually, to Rob Wilson yesterday, who's very well. And I asked him how things were going work-wise. And he said, oh, I'm just doing a lot of NASCAR drivers. And I said, really? He said, oh, yeah, my guy won last week, mega. So I said, who are you doing? He said, I'm doing Joe Gibbs Racing and Jimmy Johnson's guys. I really don't know much about NASCAR, I must say, but it sounded like, wow, at least those guys have got their heads screwed on and they're not afraid to come over and, improve. And Rob's, finds it very rewarding working with them. And I guess they still have some street races. I think the Glens already happened, but maybe they have some others. But even so, even on ovals, I'm sure Rob can teach them quite a lot for ovals. And he was very quick on ovals, Rob, when he was racing. And he did some NASCAR himself. So I thought that was really interesting that he was doing these NASCAR teams now. Amazing. What else did we talk about? We had a long talk actually about Kenny Rogers, only because it's suddenly a Kenny Rogers song from my youth in Australia came on the radio when I was coming back from Barcelona, and it was I don't know if you know it, Ruby, Don't Take Your Love to Town, which was a very emotional song for us at the time because it was all basically about the Vietnam War, or an injured vet in the Vietnam War, and we were all very exposed to that. I was so fortunate that Gough Whitlam won the '72 election in Australia, and just my date of birth was called up. I was ready to go in the army, and all of a sudden conscription was stopped. And it was a terrible thing in a way because it was your date of birth, and you had like a 1 in 4 chance of being called up, and the other 3 then just went on and had a normal life. And all your mates from school, some of them would be in Vietnam, some wouldn't. Anyway, Ruby, that song always was it was a very emotional song at the time for us, and I heard it on the radio. I hadn't heard it for years and years and years, and I have happened to mention this to Rob, and Rob never ever surprises, because Rob said, "Oh yeah, I was in a film once with Kenny Rogers." Turns out what he meant was that Kenny Rogers was filming some episode of Miami Vice in Florida or something, and Rob was at a race, and he was sitting by the pool, and he was an extra in the background of Kenny Rogers being thrown in the pool about 5 times. Actually, he's stuntman, but Kenny Rogers watching it all. And I said, "Wow, isn't that amazing, Rob?" And he said, "Yeah." And then we got on to Ulf Norrender. How did we get onto Ulf Norrender? A Swedish, very, very wealthy Swedish racing driver who has owned some very nice race cars, Lola T70 Mark 3Bs, Lola Formula 5000s, and so forth. And and Rob talking about trying to interview Ulf in New Zealand, and Ulf not really responding to anything. And I said, well, that's because he never used to sleep at night, especially the night before the race, because he was always out carousing. And Mike Halewood told me that Ulf used to just empty a bottle. He used to have like 25 bottles of aftershave, and he used to empty a complete bottle of aftershave over him and then drive off to the racetrack and go racing. I probably drank some of it too, knowing Ulf. Yeah, they were the days, were they not? Anyway, getting back, how do we get sidetracked into all this stuff? I'll blame Rob Wilson. There you go. Oh, I mentioned that somebody had said, "Do you think George Russell would benefit from some time with uh, with Rob Wilson on the live stream?" And I told him what I said, which was, I doubt George Russell's even heard of Rob Wilson. And he said, "Oh no, no, no! I did a day with George when he was at Williams." I said, "Oh right, okay, mega. How was he?" And he said, "Well, pretty spiky." Big surprise. Not pretty. I said, "Well, how was he?" I'm just trying to get a feel. I said, how did he compare with, say, DC?" He said, "Oh, yeah, quicker than DC. Definitely quicker than DC, but quite spiky." About what we all think, isn't it? Interesting, isn't it? So there you go. Zavij Dougal. The car Williams brought in Miami was a step closer to what they wanted to bring to Australia, and they think they can lead the midfield by August. And the reason for the delay are all the new systems Vols brought to the team in from 23, and this was their first car with a brand new software, so mistakes were made. Do you think Williams can win a race before the reg cycle ends? And is this an excuse? um, uh, well, the problem is with all that is that in itself, it's quite nice to read, isn't it? It seems as if, wow, they're on a real path and a track now, and yeah, maybe they can win a race before the end. Problem is, everybody else is improving as well, and whilst they've been waiting to get all this stuff done and properly installed and all the rest of it, it's what's everybody else been doing? So yeah, they've got, what we shouldn't forget is that they've got two very quick racing drivers, which is a huge plus, and they've got a Mercedes powertrain, which is a huge plus as well. So they've got two things. So they've only got to fill in, if it's a circle, there's 2/3 of the circle already done. They've got to fill in the other third. And that, in theory, with that huge investment bank, whatever it is, behind them, and all the facilities they now have, which have been upgraded or whatever, in theory, that should be completely attainable. And there's no excuse really not to be up there with McLaren. Why not? It's not, they've got the basic ingredients there. And Alpine have shown that, it's not that difficult if you've got Mercedes powertrain to get on with it and do a proper job. So my responsibility, if they're not in a position, certainly, to be getting reasonably regular podium finishes towards the end of the year, then there's something really chronically wrong at that team, because that's where they should be with all those basic components. We're not talking about other things that other teams have to live with. They've got a pretty clean road ahead of how they can do it. And as I say, show either Albon or Sainz a pretty well-balanced car with a high level of grip and good reliability and a well-structured practice and qualifying session, those guys are going to be right there for sure. But the complete mystery is why it's taken them so long, to be honest. Okay, they may well say, well, it takes so long to install this new software. Well, yeah, well, right. Okay, move on. For engine can run at hundreds centigrades, almost 20, 30 centigrade and others. So they say require less cooling systems and more aerodynamic design freedom, but they lose 10 horsepower because of it. The turbo is 1 centimeter smaller than Merc, which gives up 7 horsepower. And with the AD at UA, they can make up around 15, 20 horsepower. So far, can't be written out of the championship, and this deficit is deliberate. Source Motorsport Italia. Okay, well, let's see. You know, if they've done something quite clever there, with the cooling systems, bodywork, whatever, turbo. Yeah, one would hope they would, because they're Williams, A, and B, they've got all the basic ingredients that should allow them to do that sort of innovation. So let's see if that happens. I hope it does, for the sake of Williams. Ronnie Way says, hi Peter, your take on the proposed nominal increase in ICE power by 50 with higher fuel flow and a nominal reduction. Mistake again, should be 80 ICE and 20. Well, bring it back to where it was is what you're saying. Well, I don't think they can do that, because then they'd have to admit they made a complete mistake. I think they can just about get away with this by saying, oh, we're just fine tuning what we had, just as a result of the input from the teams and blah, 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 blah. We can get on with it. And I mean, obviously it's a step in the right direction. They should never have taken the step in the wrong direction in the first place. That's the bottom line. As I said at the beginning in my monologue, there's enough good people there not to have made these mistakes and to have known what was going to happen. But as we now know, a couple of years before the regs were finalized, a lot of voices were expressing their concerns and none of them were listened to. So now finally they are, because it's obvious what needs to be done. Would I like to see 80-20? Yeah. Would I like to see 100%? Yeah. You know, just focus on the fuels I think make it very, very simple for the public to understand. I don't think the public, I say the public, I mean, what is the public? Everybody's an individual and we can't really speak for anybody, but I can speak for my son, who's, he's a teenager, not interested in Formula One at all, because he thinks it's much too overcomplicated. He just wants to see the cars racing. That's why he likes rallying. You just get out there and watch them doing what they're doing. And all this regeneration deployment, totally not interested. And so, if it was stuff to do with fuels, but everything else was just normal ICE, I think Formula One would be a lot more understandable. But I get it that, there are a lot of people out there that love all that. Gavin White's a good example, and equally, obviously, there are many money counters in Liberty that think it's wonderful to have all these car companies showing an interest purely because there is all this electrification. So, I don't know. There's too many factions, too much emphasis on money, not enough on the show. And I speak as a purist there. Jez James, another of our members. Thanks very much, Jez. Hi, Peter. I watched Drive to Survive for the first time recently and was quite shocked at the amount of F-bombs dropped. Such a shame, but nice to be close-up angles of cars on the track. Yeah, it is a shame, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot of people that say, oh, it doesn't matter, get on with it. I personally, as you probably gather from this channel, I don't think it doesn't sit well with me, all the F-bombs and the swearing. And why do I think that? I just think you need to, with things like that, it is important to respect the lowest common denominator. And it could be your grandma, it could be anybody. And I think it's very important to be civil, polite, respect the rights of others, and not gratuitously swear. That's just me. And I'm sure I'll get a lot of feedback, backbiting as a result of that. I'm just seeing Dexter's sleeping behind me. No, he's got his eyes open. He's listening. As soon as I said that, he opened his eyes, and it looks like, Dexter, Lunchy, go on, Lunchy, come on. His breakfast is ready. Well, it's his lunch, actually. He's going over slowly to look at it. Good. Jez, another one. Michael Jackson once said that thinking when dancing is the biggest mistake you can make. You have to feel, which I think top racing drivers can relate to. Oh, absolutely. And not all athletes, top athletes, definitely. I was talking to Alejandro Del Rey actually after his rounds in the Catalunya Open Championship golf. Actually, Jack was talking to him saying, why do you take 2 practice swings sometimes and only 1 practice swing another time? And sometimes you walk up to the ball, look, other times you don't. And he said, it's different every shot. Every shot is different. And I just have to do what feels right at the time for me to hit that ball. I just want to keep it completely natural. And therefore, sometimes I try not to do any practice swings because I want the first swing to be the swing. That's how I just want to express what I'm doing. And that's exactly the same thing. And I'm sure it's the same with tennis players. If you talk to somebody like, you know, Alcaraz, is he thinking? All he's thinking about is positioning, really, and that's just peripheral vision, really. And then he's letting that guide where he's going on the court, and so it is. And the same with any artist, I'm sure. That everything is emotion and feel. Everything. So many things are emotional. I mean, I was talking to Guy Edwards once, and I talk about Guy a lot on this channel because for me, he still remains the single best procurer of motor racing sponsorship I've ever met. And he was also an extremely good racing driver as well. So Guy Edwards was one of the most important and one of the pivotal figures of motor racing in the 20th century. There's no doubt about that in my mind. And I can't even begin to think of how much money he actually raised over the years for various teams. And not only in motorsport, he did the HSBC deal for Heathrow Airport, for London, for the City of London. A lot of cabs, a lot of those jetway things at Heathrow, that was a Guy Edwards deal. Anyway, I was talking to Guy about selling once, because there was a time when I wanted to be a great salesman as well, only because I wanted lots of money to go motor racing with, and didn't do very well at it. I got a little bit, but not a lot, for Nigel. And I said to Guy, what is it? When, I can understand how you're thinking here with the silk cut deal or whatever it was, and how you put those deals together, but how did you actually get them across the line? Because so many people say, yeah, great idea, and then basically it all fades away. And he said, the most important thing when you're selling is emotion. You've got to be passionate and believe in the product. If you're not doing that and you're just trying to do it based on a slideshow, or these days a PowerPoint or whatever it is, it's never going to work. You've got to be personally, passionately involved in this. It's got to be your life and death. And I've always remembered that. And it's just an example of how passion of the type we're talking about, an emotion, is so important in everything we do. And yeah, of course, the great drivers, they're not thinking of tiny details. They're not thinking very much. That's why if Max Verstappen was on this show, and we had lots of questions to Max about short corners and why he does this and why he does that, I'd be willing to bet that he would just say, I don't know, really. I haven't really thought about it, and I don't know. I don't want to talk about that. And he'd move on. The same way Jim Clark didn't want to talk about it to his best mate, Jackie Stewart. It's like, partly they don't know because they're doing it emotionally and they're doing it through feel and touch, and it's just all happening inside their body and their brain. And partly because they see it as a personal thing, therefore, and they don't really want to talk about it. And Jackie respected that with Jim Clark. That's why he never really asked Jimmy why he did a corner that way or braked at this point. And except for the famous occasion when Jackie was telling Jimmy that he had run out of brakes going into Stowe one year, I think in the when he was racing sports cars, very early days. And Jimmy said, well, you must have had a massive shunt, did you? And Jackie said, well, no, I threw the car sideways, did this. Jimmy said, well, obviously you hadn't been braking on the limit then, had you? Anyway, yeah, it's a good point, though. It's a fascinating point. It's a fascinating thing. And I wonder, I mean, Rob Wilson's done a very good job with his vest to simulate simulate a lap, a sort of Rob Wilson lap of any given circuit. And he could program it, therefore, to simulate a Carlos Sainz version of the same lap, or a Jacques Lafitte version of the same lap. And its pulsations you feel through the vest if you're turning in a little bit early, or whatever it is, a green light if you're turning in at the right moment. And you can see all this on the dash, and Porsche use it a lot. And that will get, I don't know, that would get 95% of the way there probably, but the last few percent are always going to be feel and touch and just the brain going into this other zone of slow motion. And that can be golf, that can be motor racing, that can be Michael Jackson. Barry has now got Max going to McLaren. Does that mean we're starting to give up on Max going to Mercedes and Toto? Oh, well, yeah, they got Kimi now. McLaren. Well, yeah, maybe. Yeah, he could do. I think for him to go to McLaren, he would have to have a lot going wrong at Red Bull powertrain, because it's almost 6 1, half a dozen the other there. Because you're going from you're going away from a factory team, if you like, into a customer team in one sense of the word. And, McLaren is good, and they use a lot of ex-Red Bull people. Be nice for him probably to be back with Rob Marshall and Pete Prod and people like that. But equally, he's got some great people at Red Bull, so that would be quite a difficult choice, I think. Alonso's last win was 13 years ago today. Do you have memories of that day? I'll need to think about that one. Let me have a look. What was that? I guess I check my WhatsApp. Okay. Alonso. What was that race then? You asked me all these questions like this. Was I even there? That's the question. I don't know. Fernando Alonso, Formula One. We're going. Here we go. So what was that race? Formula One. This was the Stefano Domenicali Ferrari era, I guess, was it? Is that what we're talking about? 13? Is that right? Did he win anything after 13? Yeah, no, didn't win in 14 by the look of it. 15, then he went to McLaren. So it looks like it was Spanish Grand Prix in the Ferrari, 2013. I wasn't actually there because I was in the back end of the whole USF1 disaster at that point. So all I can say is, it was poetic justice for him. It was nice that he won at Barcelona and he won in a Ferrari. And yeah, lots of blue, I should think, for the Catalunya Alonso side of the fence. That was an interesting time for Ferrari for Fernando, because he was trying to assert himself at Ferrari in a way that never really worked because of the way Michael had set Ferrari up so long ago. And it was a bit acrimonious, I would have said at that time. Not a great feel within the team. But such a shame he never won a championship, though. That's the thing. He should have won a championship at Ferrari. No doubt about that. Warland says, my main man Pete is on. Top viewing. Thank you very much. Nice of you. Alessandro Dralazar wants to get down to it. Sir, what are the main differences between young Max and this Kimi? Who's better? I think we mean Kimi Antonelli there. I always have to say that because Kimi Raikkonen was not slow. He was very, very good racing driver. But anyway, I know you mean Antonelli. I think from the start, Max was a better medium and high-speed corner driver. No doubt about that. And I think Kimi's this year has really improved in those two areas. And that will be a really nice platform now for him to move forward this year, for the rest of this year. And it's something that will make it even more difficult for George on a race by race basis to upstage Kimi. Kimi's now very good all round. I think Max. A lot of people still love to say Max is dangerous. Max is a risk taker. Max is a dirty driver. All that stuff. Personally, I don't buy that. I just think he's an ultimate racer who's really, really good on track position, track craft, feeling what the next guy's going to do, positioning the car, not hesitating when it's the right moment to do an overtake. Lando Norris, take note. And just generally a decisive, hard racer. And I'm not saying this because Kimi comes over as a younger, slightly more ebullient Italian, vivacious Italian, and therefore you assume that he's not maybe as hard and as cutthroat as Max Verstappen. I'm saying it because of the way Kimi drives. I think he's not quite as, I don't think he just goes for gaps the way Max does and did from the start of his career. That's not to say that he's not a great overtaker potentially and will be and can do some great passes and has done some great passes. But I think I think Max will always have the edge on medium and high speed corners and a difficult car slightly, but not much. But Max will have the edge there because he's so good in those, and he's been doing that for so long. Kimi definitely, I think, is more able to manage variables that come into play than George now, and that's quite a big thing. That's a very big thing. And Kimi, to his credit, is unafraid to take everything the race to George, and he's not in any way subjugated by George's experience and George's success. And he's just happy to, like Max, he can just, that doesn't mean anything to him. He's just going to go ahead and win his races. Thank you very much. I think on slow corners, there's not a lot between them, not at the moment. I mean, again, haven't really seen Kimi in a bad car yet, and I think that will be the defining element, because we've seen Max in a bad car and he still drives it incredibly well. We haven't yet seen Kimi in that situation, so I think that's the one area where you'd need to have a direct comparison before you could really be objective about these two. But in a good car, I think Kimi will probably do into Rascasse what Max does with the Red Bull. I'd be surprised if he doesn't. And he's looked that good already. So, I'm talking about Monaco now, obviously. And between turns 1 and 2 in Canada, just to keep it current, I think Kimi will be very good there, and probably as good as Max would be if he was in a Merc on that particular part of the lap. Not every part of the lap. High speed braking into the hairpin, for example, in Canada, probably Max. Oh, for sure, Max has still got it over Kimi. That's another area I would think where Max has still got it. He's very, very good on high speed braking. I say that in general terms. I mean, obviously, high speed braking today doesn't mean anything quite the same as it did before the 26 regulations came into play. But I'm just using that as some sort of yardstick on which to base a comparison. Yeah, very different backgrounds, obviously. And Max has got a very forceful character. Joss has been forceful. Everything's very pushy. I'm not sure it's the same with Kimi. Different, he's got Toto with his arm around his shoulder the whole time. So, Max never needed that, has never had that. Whether that manifests in a difference in the way they drive or the way they would approach a race, we'll have to see. I mean, everybody's different. You can't just say because that's the way Max does it, that is the only way. But I'd say Max has still got an edge on medium and high speed corners, probably medium speed, high change of direction. I think Max will be better through the chicane at Canada, the last chicane. And not necessarily how close they are to the wall, which everybody loves to watch, but what he's doing, manipulating the car mid-corner in order to steer it straight to the exit. I think at medium speed there, Max will be still without peer there. Charles and Max, I think, will still be the two best at that. But as I say, turn 1, 2, I see Kimi being really quick. The first chicane, yeah, Kimi will be good there. That, as I say, that right kink after the second chicane, not sure. After the first chicane, I'm not sure Kimi would be with Max there if there was low grip. And the rest of the lap, apart from the high-speed braking, very similar. Yeah, good question. Go on for hours on that, comparing those two, really. Daniel Brodsky. Hi, Peter. Thank you for your job. Thank you. Why Oscar was faster than Lando in Japan, and in Miami it was the other way around? Reg changes. Also, Colapinto is better than Gasly in Miami. Um, I think in Miami, Oscar got a bit psyched out by the wind, the crosswinds, and he had a couple of moments in qualifying. And because he hasn't yet, well, let's go back a step further to Japan. I always I felt in Japan that Oscar was indeed starting to really become the Oscar that he used to be in his first 6 months at McLaren, starting to turn in earlier, shorter corners, focusing on being very soft and supple into the corner. And it looked that way to me. And I think the results showed that. But it didn't translate when he came to Miami. Now, is that due to the new regulations helping Lando more than Oscar and taking Lando into Oscar's area now and then putting Oscar under some pressure again, as a result of which he started to brake a little bit later in a straight line and then had a moment in the crosswind and then backed away from that moment and then didn't really get a quick lap out of the car? Is it that? Maybe it is. Yeah, I can't say McLaren would know that, would have evidence of proof of that, but probably the new regs have helped Lando a bit, because I don't think he's ever going to push a car to the absolute limit consistently. I think he's always going to be a little bit under it now. Championship one, nice team. If the car's good, he'll be right there sort of attitude. And I think with as it was in Miami, it's obviously it's a circuit that Lando enjoys anyway, and it doesn't penalize drivers who do turn in a little bit later and extend the straight. It doesn't penalize them. It does still reward drivers who do it absolutely perfectly with shorter corners, but there's no real penalty to drive the way Carlos Sainz or Lando or Oscar drive. And I think Oscar and what happened? I mean, it's a very good question as to why Oscar was so poor in qualifying, because a lot of it you could say, what we saw on Sunday was due to his track position, but he just didn't look as good as Lando in the car, did he? And that was the problem. And I think it could be something like that, that suddenly Oscar was doing what he did and it worked in Japan, and then the regulations changed and suddenly Lando was on Oscar's territory. And as a result, Oscar went back into where the mode he was last year of looking at Lando's telemetry to see why and where he was quick. And then all of a sudden lost focus of his own lap and started to drive with. And when you're driving, braking in a straight line as late as you can, turning in late, Lando's always going to beat Oscar at that, in my opinion, because he's just a bit softer with everything he does. But when Oscar can find an advantage and start to shorten the corners, then he'll always do Lando. But he didn't do that in Miami. He did not do that in Miami. And maybe it was just a reflex action to go back to where he was last year. We'll see how it goes in Canada. Colapinto, yeah. Again, I don't think longer corners were a huge disadvantage in Miami. But it looks like there was not a great front end on that car, and they did change the feel and the balance of the car a bit, and Pierre couldn't do anything with the front of the car, and yeah, the back was working. And from Colapinto's point of view, that's what he wants. He wants a back that works so he can lean on that rear and then get the power on soon. And yeah, he did a very good job at that. As good as it was, he did a good job at that, but it meant that Pierre couldn't get anything out of the car at all and was scratching around and confused probably. Just going back to the scrolls here. So sorry. Peter, if Max goes to McLaren, who leaves, Lando or Oscar? Well, I don't think it would be a case of Max is coming, so who are we going to get rid of? It would be, oh, wow, we've lost Oscar, who's available? Oh, wow, we've lost Lando, who's available? So you look at it that way. I don't imagine McLaren are going to just suddenly go out and hire Max Verstappen without any plan of which driver he's going to replace. So I think that the real question is which McLaren driver is more likely to leave at the end of their contract period, and I would say it's probably Oscar, isn't he? If he doesn't win the championship this year and Lando's won it in 25, he's going to feel pretty peeved about it all and want to have a new fresh start somewhere else. And that's the most likely scenario. If Lando was available, who would be out there paying him a fortune to drive? Ferrari? There's too many good drivers out there now, really, to be paying Lando a fortune to go to Ferrari. And they can probably imagine that he's not going to transform the team, and that he's not really probably quicker than Carlos Sainz, for example. So for Lando, I think it's probably more likely he'll stay at McLaren, wouldn't it? Andre Bastanciori. How do great drivers change their driving when they have a rear engine? It's funny you should mention that, given that picture I published early on of the Wins Spitfire with its front engine and the guy sitting over the rear axle, Sammy Sessions. It never seemed to be a real problem for drivers to go from front to rear engine. It was more, isn't it great not to have the heat of the engine and the radiator in front of me? Oh, that's a bit cooler. But then again, Cooper's early on, the big radiator in the nose, all the water lines, massive overheating in the footwell area. When Jack won Monaco in '59, he had sort of third-degree burns on his feet. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But it was mainly, I spoke to Tony Brooks about that. And he said, yeah, if the car was good, you can drive anything, really. It didn't really mean a lot to him. And one minute he'd be in a front engine, Ferrari. The next minute he'd be in a rear engine BRM or whatever. You're just able to do it. A lot of the drivers did migrate. Sterling Moss, never an issue for him. Max Verstappen, not an issue for him. Getting to the GT3 car. It's all about balance and feel. And it's the same when you look at one of those early 80s Renault turbos. Do you see how near the front axle René Arnoux and Alain Prost are sitting? And you think, how did they drive like that? Well, they did, and they very quickly got used to it. Porsche 9083, similar thing. Indeed, the Porsche 9083 was all about having the driver as far forward as he could to give him great visibility on circuits like Targa Florio and the Nürburgring, to be right at the front of the car so you can see everything. Yeah, I don't think that to change. It's just every race car basically has understeer, oversteer, and it's up to the driver to balance the car. And depending on the grip level, that's something that's achievable or not. And then you've got traction elements and other things that come into play. But generally, all race cars are driven at the limit of tire adhesion, front engine or not. Raul 5160, does Red Bull's recent competitiveness prove that Newey isn't the end all or be all? Well, it's a bit of a double whammy, isn't it? He's gone to Aston Martin and the car's dreadful, and he's left Red Bull and the Red Bull's not bad at all. The big question was how Red Bull were always going to perform once Adrian had left, and Adrian and his infrastructure for that matter. And initially it was pretty good, and then it fell into a bit of a trough, and now they're coming back again, and they've got more people joining the team soon, engineers from Racing Bulls and other teams. And so it's not to say, however, that if Adrian Newey had stayed at Red Bull, had never left, that Max wouldn't be leading the World Championship by now. He may well be. So, it's very difficult to say that, isn't it? The Red Bull, Adrian Newey, everything was in place. He knew how to make the company work. He knew how to do the car, work with the engine people. Everything was fine. He then went to a completely new environment, new for him, new for the environment as well. A new engine supplier for that team, but one that Adrian knew, albeit different personnel. And he was completely, dare I say it, out of his depth, because there was no infrastructure there for him around which to do the car. Of course, the car he's done is probably very good, but we've yet to see that, because as technical director or team principal, he was for a while, and then whatever he is now, he did not foresee the issues at Honda and allowed that to get away from him, and has now wasted all this time whilst Honda get the engine right. And that's something that would never have happened in the Red Bull days, because other people would have, stopped that. it wouldn't have happened anyway with the Red Bull powertrain thing. So yeah, the big question is if Adrian had not left Red Bull, would Max Verstappen have won races by now? That's the question, I think, and we don't know the answer, do we? But I suspect he probably would have. Uh, yeah, because the Red Bull powertrain's not been a bad engine, has it? Not as good as the Merc. Maybe he wouldn't have won races. He certainly would have got some podium finishes. So you can't really judge everything in terms of, strict black and white like that. Rao continues, Aston Martin's work environment is reportedly very tedious and bleak. How can it be? It's at the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit. They couldn't have a better environment. Flags flying, great atmosphere, memories of the great days. Oh, I forgot. This is the Lawrence Stroll way of getting Formula One racing. Yeah, there's a difference. Tedious and bleak. Well, it doesn't surprise me. So that happens when everybody's afraid basically, afraid to speak up, afraid to speak out, afraid to gather around the water cooler and discuss things, and everybody's worried about their job and how much money they may or may not be getting, and it's a great shame. Bit like Bernie Ecclestone's environment at Formula One when he was running it. I mean, Bernie's way of operation was the opposite of open plan, the opposite of hot desks. He would have cubicles everywhere, and only you knew exactly what you were doing, apart from Bernie, in your little cubicle, and you were not allowed to know what anybody else was doing. And the only person that knew the entire picture was Bernie, and that's how he used to run it. Probably still does, and it worked. And the great thing, to give Bernie his credit, the great thing was how loyal everybody was. And I think that's because Bernie, like Michael Schumacher, did a very good job of knowing everybody or understanding everybody's issues, personal or not, and helping them when they needed big help. And he was very good at that. And I think, I can't imagine the Strolls are in that class of person, to be honest. I may be wrong. I don't know. I just can't imagine it the way it comes over. Taylor, 80277. Peter, may I ask what went on before and after the Italian Grand Prix 92 when Nigel announced his retirement? As a child, I was heartbroken when I heard the news. Nigel was my hero. I was heartbroken as well, but it wasn't hearing the news. I knew what was going on and how to do it. I mean, I was in a bit of a difficult position because I was team manager, and obviously I was running, the race team and the test team, and Ricardo as well as Nigel, but I knew Nigel like a brother, and we were very close. And I did spend a lot of time on the Saturday night trying to convince him not to not to do this. Excuse me. What happened then is I got to the end of my coffee, and one of the coffee grains went down my throat. There we go. Sorry about that. Trying not to do it, and painting a picture of him, the pleasure he would get beating Prost in '93 and winning the championship again, 2 in a row. That was my approach to him. But he was on a high then. He'd had a good chat with Carl Haas. He had a good chat with Paul Newman. He loved the idea of America, of not having to go to Bernie to ask for passes for the family, and just generally flying around America in a private aircraft and not having to worry about, going into different time zones really. And just the whole ease of the American way of life was a big attraction for him as well, after all the hassle of Formula One. And it was, I knew his mind was made up. And I'd seen Nigel like this times before, when he left Williams in '86, when he signed that Ferrari deal to go to Ferrari. I did all I could to try and stop that happening as well. But he had his mind made up. Nothing was going to stop him. And he went and signed that deal with Ferrari. And lo and behold, as predicted, Honda came back with a lot more money for Nigel and persuaded him to stay for '87. And he had to pay his way out of that Ferrari contract. And so it went on. And yeah, it was that Sunday morning driving to the track. I remember it very well. I was on my own and just driving my road car very early. Not, I felt very, very strange. Well, how did I feel? I didn't feel very sad, because I too was planning to leave Williams at the end of that year, because I'd just basically had enough travel for a while and wanted to go to America and do my own thing. Nothing to do with Nigel, but I knew I'd be hanging out with him in '93 in America. So I was quite, quite relaxed about that, quite looking forward to that. But equally, I could, the end of an era is always the end of an era. And for this all to be happening at Monza of all places with so much emotion, so much history was very, very, very tough. And yeah, I don't think Frank really believed Nigel was going to do it. That was the point. And no matter how many times Sheridan or I told Frank that this is real and Nigel won't do it, he just sort of thought, nah, because too many times in the past he'd sort of done something like this and it all worked out in the end in the Frank Williams style of things. But I knew, Sherry knew that it wasn't going to happen and he wasn't going to race with Prost. It was partly because he liked having Ricardo in the other car in a sort of Max Verstappen-ish sort of way, having, a teammate that he can handle. And part of it was he never really enjoyed racing with Prost at Ferrari because of the things I did talk about in the previous live stream, with Nigel going well with the Scalabroni upgrades on the car, and then Prost, as a result, getting Steve Nichols in to fight that, and then doing two different cars for 91, complete mess. Whereas if Alain had just stayed quiet and they'd gone ahead, they'd probably both still be at Ferrari at that point. Nigel probably wouldn't even come back to Williams. But things changed, moved on, and he never really enjoyed that Prost time. So he just didn't want another year with Prost. That was that. So he went to Mario. He didn't really enjoy driving with Mario either, in IndyCar, actually. So that was that. Mouse down, 83. Genasvar, I doubt Max will leave Red Bull, though. Let's not forget how they turned 25 around, and in Miami they were competitive and still have 7 kilos to shed off the car. Max isn't out of the fight. Well, that's good. I didn't know it was 7 kilos exactly, so that's good to know. Thank you very much. And yeah, as I said in that previous answer, he's going to, I can't imagine him leaving Red Bull, all things being equal, for McLaren. I can imagine him going possibly to Ferrari if he gets a massive offer and blah, 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 if he's fed up with Red Bull, or even to Merck. But McLaren, I just can't see it. Maybe. Whoa, those rally jumps, says Mousedown. Yeah, I know. And I got to say again, the production of a rally these days is so good. The drones, the photography, the aerial photography, the onboards, it's so good. And they've got a great channel now on Rally TV, which is called International, where you just get the noise, you just get the sound of the car and the co-driver and nothing else, no talking over it, which is the great channel to be on. And I just love it. And so those cars are great, aren't they? They're so quick. We're going, excuse me, we're going up to the Rally Valencia this weekend, the 4th round, I think it is now, the Spanish Super Championship, to watch my mate Cohetti in his Skoda. That's going to be fun, isn't it? Looking forward to that. It's tarmac, so it'll be really quick. MM Global. When speaking of rallying, what did you make of Rovan Perez' foray into the single seaters? Yeah, not very good, was it? There is a video there on the Red Bull thing of Callie driving an old Red Bull Formula One car around the Red Bull ring. And actually, I remember watching it at the time, about 2 weeks after it happened. I remember thinking, it doesn't actually look that quick. He wasn't really doing much with the car. He was doing a good job, but everything was on rails and very carefully orchestrated. And I just thought, it's a bit odd. It's not how he drives a rally car. Anyway, then he made this decision to go circuit racing. And then then it was going to be Formula 2, sorry, Super Formula, Formula 2, Formula 1. I remember thinking, well, he wouldn't be doing that unless he was very confident that it could happen. And obviously Toyota are behind him and they believe that that's the way to go. And so, mega. And then, Richard Selwyn, my mate, engineer, ex iSport, now with High Tech, went out to Japan to help. And I thought, well, if he's there, that's good news as well. But then he just got sick and nauseous and couldn't drive the car. And then he did the New Zealand series and went pretty well in the wet in one race, running in the top 3 or 4. But in the dry, not really there. That's about what you'd expect, I suppose. But you'd also expect, if he's confident of getting into Formula One and he's a rally champion, he should really be dominating that New Zealand series. That's what I would have thought, and yet he didn't. And then he went back into Super Formula and to more testing and decided that wasn't going to work. So all very sad, really, but a little bit like Kimi, Formula One rallying. But Finns are like that, aren't they? I'm not sure he's worried about it, and I'm sure he can do whatever he wants with Toyota in the future. They love him, quite correctly so. And Toyota is such a good company these days. They're like like Ford used to be in the 70s when, Ford dominated motor racing really. And the Ford motorsport press conference every year was the biggest thing you could go to. And Ford had feet in every part of the motor racing spectrum. And Toyota are like that today, and they will look after Cali. It'd be interesting to see what he does. It might be WEC, might go back to rallying. Interesting to see. Like if you're a human, yeah. Well, hopefully we are human. I listen to quite a lot of podcasts, and some of them say guaranteed, genuine, human, real, not AI. I think I'm human. I hope I am. Thank you for looking at Indy 500 history, Herbert Williams. Yeah, well, I love Indy. I love Indy history. I love Indy really, and I love the Grand Prix when it was there, the Formula One race. I still think it was one of the best, apart from Watkins Glen, Long Beach with the two others. I think Indy was a great venue for Formula One. I used to love that, and it's so sad the way it all ended. And anyway, when it's the 500, and it's like these days, but certainly it had this romantic feel to it as well with the old Speedway Motel there. I don't think it's there anymore either. But the whole thing about Indy, sad and happy, great memories either way. Sachin Sesh Adri. Hi, Peter. Did you know Seb Loeb was a ballet dancer before rally? Talk about poise and balance. Any interesting past lives of Formula One drivers? I didn't know that. No. And isn't that interesting? If you can stand on your big toe and do this, I guess you can do anything in a rally car. It's just that not many ballet dancers probably even know what rallying is. Good for Seb Loeb. Seb Loeb. I remember Sterling Moss saying to me once that the nearest thing to driving a racing car that he had experienced was dressage with horses. Very, very precise movement with a horse, which his sister Pat was very good at. And Sterling used to do a bit of that, and he says, "Oh yeah, oh boy, that exactly the same thing. It's not the car, it's the horse, but you've got to let the horse feel and warn the horse what you want it to do next. That's the key to it." And so I remember him always doing that and saying that. I'm not, but he didn't do it obviously at professional level, but he obviously was pretty good at it, I would have said. Well, I think Vic Elford is a very good example of a totally versatile driver that used all of the different facets of motorsport to their maximum. And he was a great rally driver, great sports car driver on road courses, and a great Formula One driver. And so that's an unusual combination. Doesn't really, in terms of that, he's the epitome of it, I think, Vic. And what he achieved in all categories of motorsport was just outstanding. But outside motorsport, probably the most romantic would have been the Marquis de Portago, the Spanish Marquis, who was a bobsledder, Olympic bobsledder, and he also rode in the Grand National horse race as a jockey, and then raced for the Ferrari factory team in Formula One and sports cars. So he was killed in 57, sadly, but he was a cool dude, black leather jacket, or in a dark brown leather jacket. It's difficult to tell if it was brown or black, I think, because I don't think it was ever cleaned. And he used to wear it a lot, and, the leather gloves and just the whole thing. It was just total romance, killed in the 57 Mille Miglia. But he was very talented and very good at what he did. Okay, Katayama. I'm not quite sure which mountain it was, but he was a pretty prolific mountain climber. And I think it was K2, something like that. He climbed in or around his career, Formula One career. Good guy, really good guy, very good guy, Katayama. A lot of time for him. Then you got the pianists, you know, Francois Sever, Elio De Angelis, very good pianists, musicians. I don't really count all those ones who are out on stage with their guitars. I mean, that's, yeah, okay. Boom, boom, boom. No, to be a pianist is something different, and that's a real musician. So, yeah, Francois and Elio had that little touch. Jim Clark was at school, pretty good cricketer, violin player. I've often wondered about the relationship between music and Formula One. And, you know, Johnny Clace, of course, was Johnny Clace and the Clay Pigeons. You know, not a slow driver. Probably lots I'm not remembering, but those are ones that obviously spring to mind of talent, interesting past lives of Formula One drivers. And just talking about Black Jack Brabham and the BT19, don't ever forget that picture we've got of Jack riding a bicycle with his arms cross-hand on the handlebars. Don't try it. It's not easy at all. That was certainly not. Oh, okay. Sashin's actually changed it now and said, yeah, gymnast, sorry, not ballet. Okay. All right. Well, not that far away. Gymnast, you can still stand on the pirouette on the parallel bars, can't you? Herbert Williams, F1 is leaving Australia. Your opinion? Well, if it is leaving Australia, and you're ahead of me on the news if that's happening, but if it is, in other words, no more Australian Grand Prix, is that really the case? But if it is the case, it'll be because probably it's one of the least profitable races from a Liberty point of view, because quite early on, the Australian Grand Prix organisers did a very good deal with Bernie, which I think is probably still in place, for keeping quite a lot of the rights for the race for themselves, as distinct from signing them all over to Liberty. And they also have a big 4-day race program in which they presumably make quite a lot of money from Aussie V8s and classics and so forth, which is very unlike the modern pro forma Grand Prix, where there's long periods of silence, then you might get an academy race, and then there's another long period of silence, and then people will be driving around the circuit in a truck, and then eventually you'll see the Formula One cars, because, you know, that's quite boring, isn't it? Australia have a really, really good race card, really good program of events over the 4 days, and they do really well. And but I guess financially there are going to be other circuits coming in with a lot more money to pay F1. But it'd be a great shame after all this time. And I agree with Herbert Williams. I miss Adelaide. I miss Adelaide too, like crazy. What a great race that was. But it's not, you know, it's sadly, it's saying what a great race that was, what a nice weekend, what a lovely circuit, doesn't mean anything. It's how much money does that racetrack make for Formula One now, that event. And that's the sad thing about it. Money, money, money. And it's, you know, actually shame on the Formula One teams for allowing it to have got to that point, because there will always be an argument for having a British Grand Prix, having I was going to say a French Grand Prix, a German Grand Prix, but of course we don't have them. But we have a British Grand Prix, we have an Italian Grand Prix at Monza, and a lot of those two races probably come under the heading of not massively profitable for Formula One either. But there would be such an outcry if either of those two races dropped from the calendar that's why they're there, really. I still think that's the case. But for all the other races, it's obviously difficult. If we don't have a French Grand Prix, we can obviously not have an Australian Grand Prix. If we don't have a German Grand Prix, we can obviously not have a Malaysian Grand Prix, you know, so it goes on. Milestone. Peter's story just now had me Google some weird old Formula One car designs. Did the Tyrrell P34 really have 6 wheels, or is that fake? Tyrrell is real, says Herbert. It's insane. Yeah, well, of course it's real, but you'd have to ask these questions in this world of AI. I know that. And the Tyrrell was a 76 6-wheeler, 4 front wheels, very small front wheels, all the same size, and 2 normal rear wheels. And when it first appeared, I was at the launch at the Tyrrell woodshed in Surrey, and I was talking to Derek Gardner, the designer. I said to Derek, you know, what's your thinking behind this? And it was all to do with balance and tires and grip and all to do with handling. And I said, so frontal area, reducing frontal area. I said, yeah, but it's not what we're doing with this car. A lot of people obviously assume that was, but of course you had the big rear tires, which were a huge, big part of the drag coefficient. The problem was for the six-wheeler, really, when Williams and March did, if you like, a proper six-wheeler where you had normal front tires and then Ford-driven front tires at the rear through a four-wheel drive system as well. So the car had unbelievable traction, very good grip and balance, and was unbelievably quick in a straight line. So it was banned before it raced. That was the Williams more than that, but March did the same. Did a bit of hill climbing, I think, from memory. But yeah, so it all got banned. Ban it. And that's it's one of the reasons Mickey Thompson left Indy, I think, because as innovative as he was, he everything just get banned if it was good, like the turbine, for example. Very sad end to his life, Mickey Thompson. He, as I say, he was this sort of cult hero in America, a very successful drag racer, very innovative engineer, always working, always. You'll see all this in the podcast, that one I mentioned. I'll just put the thing up again. Is it actually, where are we? Excuse me, just drop the page. Oh, that one there. There you go. Dorkomotive podcast, Brian Loans. Yeah, you'll see that. And it's very sad because in '88, he and his wife set out early from their California home and were ambushed by two masked people on bicycles, would you believe? And both of them shot and killed, murdered. And it's a terrible thing. And obviously, Mickey lived in a fairly turbulent world of maybe, I think he made a lot of money. Had a very, very good business in terms of performance engineering. But it was a terrible end. And eventually his partner got arrested. And I think he's still inside for the whole thing, but very sad. Matthew Red. Hi, Peter. How does the start-finish line get determined by the track? Sometimes it's before the grid, on others it's in front, while some are in the middle. Is there a standard they should follow? Not sure, actually. Is it? I always thought it was. I've never really paid attention to that. I've always assumed it was just at the front of the grid there on the start finish line on the grid. I'll ask Mark Slade about that next time we chat, which will be sometime over the Canadian Grand Prix weekend, for sure. Maybe before that, but I'll try and find an answer there. What would be? Yeah, maybe it's related to safety cars and stuff as well. Pit lane exit, maybe. We'll find out. Hi, Peter. Hope all's well. Yeah, it is. Very, very good. Thank you. Formula One feels rather flat this year. Really? I thought everybody was all buoyant now. Amazing race in Miami. I doubt the rule adjustments will change it. Really? Do you think we need new regulations in Formula One to feel like Formula One again? Okay. Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but we did have a reasonable race in Miami, whether you're pro or against the regs, and I think they can only. There will be some exceptions where some circuits will still look a bit odd, maybe even Canada. But in general, I think we'll be looking okay for the rest of the year. We'll fudge through, sort of thing, with regulations that, in my opinion, are not particularly well written or indeed required by Formula One at the moment. And I would love to see Formula One, and I've said this before on this channel many times, I'd love to see Formula One go back to basics. As a purist, I'd love to see us go back to racing for the show rather than for exotic technology, which may or may not induce new car companies to join the sport. I'm in the other camp. I just think I'd love to have pure race teams, and I like it to be very simple, straightforward racing. Very happy for the teams to design and build their own cars within a set of regulations, but I think we should have reusable fuels and all of the technology that goes with fuels. But I think everything else should really be internal combustion engines, go motor racing, very, very competitive, 5 or 6 drivers fighting out the race every given weekend. That's what I love, and that's what I'd love to see. And I don't think we've got that now. I think we've made it much too complicated. Herbert Williams says, what is the status of Ocon? Who might replace him? Ali Rovanpera. Well, I mean, they are a Toyota-based team, so I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere along the line there might be some, not pressure, but some inducement to run a Japanese driver. Wouldn't it be great if it was Niro Fukuzumi, who I interviewed on this channel recently, who's racing Super Formula now, used to be in Formula 3 alongside George Russell at ART. Not slow, very good guy. And he's on the path, isn't he? He's on a Toyota motorsport path. There are a lot of good young Toyota drivers in Japan right now. So that's one thing to consider. Jack Doohan is the reserve driver there. Wouldn't it be great to see Jack Doohan get a full season with Haas? And of course, we can't assume that at some point Oliver Behrman won't go to Ferrari. And if that's the case, would Haas want to keep Ocon because he's the experienced driver and then have a young guy alongside him? So a lot of things could happen at Haas, particularly now with that Toyota link. But thanks very much, Herbert, as well, for being a part of our channel. Really appreciate it. Peter, will you do a Nürburgring 24 watch along? No. I'll do a 24-hour Nürburgring race highlights and when it's over. Thank you very much. But yeah, looking forward to that. Canadian Grand Prix isn't on the same day as the 500, or is there a 3-week gap between Miami and Montreal? 3-week gap between Miami and Montreal. So I think Indy's the following week, right? Memorial Day, usually the end of May, isn't it May the 30th, around there? So Montreal's on 24, so that makes sense. We're talking about that, the Indy picture. I'm doing my usual thing of being very slow to get through all the questions. Wow, that model is a super hot fire. Does Diego? Oh no, that's the model. The Brabham model is a Diego online shop where you need to buy some. It's a good point, actually. I'll ask Diego where he gets them from, and we can put up the link there. It's a beautiful model. He's also given me one of the BRM P153 with which Pedro Rodriguez, helmet behind me, won the 70 Belgian Grand Prix. Beautiful car, Yardley BRM. Jimmy Johnson's guys, as I quoted it, have done Le Mans 24. Well, there you go. As Rob Wilson's working with those guys. Good on him. Peter, what do you think about the Hamilton retiring rumours? Probably started by people other than Lewis Hamilton, I would suggest. What's Lewis's mindset most likely to be? And one that obviously he would not reveal publicly. I would suggest that it is, give it a few more races. I've felt pretty good in these cars. For some reason, Charles was ahead of me in Miami. In brackets, the real reason was because the car was quite difficult to drive in Miami, particularly in qualifying with the crosswinds and other variables that came into play. And Charles just did a beautiful lap, whereas Lewis went back into a sort of cocoon of operation within which he felt comfortable. And it didn't work for him. Well, it worked for him, it just wasn't that quick. And that was the problem. And then he was just, he drove a race as a result of that. So Lewis will be, I imagine right now, he's not even thinking of retirement. He's thinking of Canadian Grand Prix, bring it on, hope it's a bit wet. I can really show my talent and I'll be all over the car and be very quick. So I don't think, but if it continues as is, and he's always slower than Charles, appreciably slower, and doesn't get a result, a proper result, a win, or even a P2, well, a win, let's say a win, then yeah, I think he might think, I've almost had enough of this. And it's not fair on Ferrari because I'm not delivering on the money they're paying me. He might think that at the end of the year. Might. Unlikely, but might. Super chats just come in from On the Limit 21. Hi, Peter. Thanks for doing these live chats. Do you think Formula One moves too slowly? The talk of bringing back the V8 is great, but 2030? Well, you could argue that 2030 is not that far away if you're an engine builder. It's effectively 3 years away, and that's about the absolute minimum limit you could have to do a new power unit. So you could say, well, it's happening really quickly, isn't it? Equally, I think it does, yeah. There's nothing like pressure to put on people, and if they came up with a formula which could allow them to recycle some of the old stuff, it'd be more fun, wouldn't it? And just get on with it. 20 next year, okay, fully normally aspirated engines next year, get on with it. Be interesting to do that, wouldn't it? Because with the Williams FW14B Renault, which obviously was an active ride car, and all the computation that was required in order to start that car, when they did the rebuild of that car a few years ago now, none of that stuff worked. And it wasn't the problem with the software, it was the hardware didn't exist anymore. And that's why, in actually to get that engine running and the car running, Williams had to go to Cosworth to come up with new hardware with which to use the software, because Renault had chucked all the old hardware away. Interesting, isn't it? So if they went back to old engines, they'd probably have the same problem, but I'm sure they'd get around that quite quickly. But to Formula One, do we really care? I mean, think about this. In 66, the Formula One went to 3 litres from 1.5. It was a big change, double the size engine overnight. And one of the customer engines available for several private teams, and indeed the factory Cooper team, was the Maserati V12, 3-litre V12. What was that engine? How did that come about? I can tell you how that engine came about. That was an engine raced in a 250F Maserati driven by Juan Manuel Fangio in 1958. That's when that V12 first appeared. And I say 57 it would have been, sorry, 57 Italian Grand Prix. And it didn't really do much, but it had always been there, and it was used, what, 6, 8 years later. So those things are quite interesting. Engines don't go away, you know. You could recycle and bring them back. We don't really care. We just want really good racing, and that's what we want. Spectacular racing. So I do think 2030, thinking about it, I think it's a very good point you make. And I think it is too long to wait. What are we going to do in 7, 8, and 9? Good point. Emmanuel J09. Hi, Peter. Is anything less than being able to drive an F1 car at the limit? Cars that require full commitment to get the best out of them is just not Formula One. What's the ideal car for Formula One, in your opinion? Yeah, I agree. I think that is right. I think anything less than a car that is very, very difficult to drive on the limit, but can be balanced with astute use of throttle, brakes, and steering in a perfect world, 4-wheel drift, that is a perfect Formula One car, 250F Maserati. What is the ideal car for Formula One in your opinion? Well, go right back to basics. You'd want to strip virtually all of the aero off any of the current cars for a start. And then you'd want to have more suspension travel, and you'd want to have slightly longer braking areas. So braking became more of a thing and a passing zone. And you'd want to have 2 or 3 tire companies in competition. And you could limit everything. Obviously, you can limit all sorts of things. You can limit top speeds, you can limit cornering loads, you can do all of that. But generally speaking, you want cars that can be drifted and cars that can be slid out of corners with power oversteer. A lot of power oversteer means you're going a little bit slower, but tires that don't degrade too quickly. So yeah, what are we talking about here? We're talking here about the 66 Brabham BT19, are we not? I mean, the angles that Denny Hulme and Jack Brabham used to get in that car, that engine note, that 3-litre Repco V8, beautiful chassis, incredibly well balanced Ron Toronac, Jack Brabham design space frame chassis, Goodyear tires, racing against Firestone at the time. So we had the tire war. Absolutely fabulous. And again, the problem is, you know, if you think of the number of sponsors, say McLaren have got, where would they put all those logos on this car? They don't have the side pods, they don't have the front and rear wings. You know, that's the problem. And it is a real problem. As much as you may think that's a stupid thing, it's a real problem. And that's why we'll never go back to that look of car, in my opinion, very sadly, because too much money is made by all these advertising hoardings on the car called aerodynamics. There's Peter being an absolute heathen when it comes to engineering, but you know, what would Adrian say about that? So that would be me, you know, that's what I would do. And I loved that era. I have to say, I loved the 80s, the late 80s. the turbo era of the late 80s, particularly 86, 87. I know I was lucky, privileged to be at Williams at the time, but that 11 and 11B Honda was a brutal car. And although we had big front and rear wings, we didn't have a lot of ground effect, and those cars had to be driven by real racing drivers, and it was amazing. You know, we had obviously Nigel and Nelson, and then we had Alan Prost and Ayrton Senna. It was a pretty good era, and that brought the best out in racing drivers too. And there is an era where you did have good hoardings on the car, and we had a great car with Canon, Mobil, ICI, Denim, as well as Honda logos on the car. So it all worked and all fitted. So yeah, you know, let's go back to that. 1,000 horsepower, 1,200 horsepower, not much downforce, big rear wing, big front wing. Get on with it. Simple, lovely. My favorite Grand Prix car in terms of shape and look, aesthetics, the way they look on the racetrack, the way the driver sits in them, the helmets. My favorite all-time car, the 65 Formula One car, 1.5 litre, Lotus, BRM, Ferrari, Brabhams, all beautiful. So there you go. iRacing Aussie. I couldn't believe Derek Daly's story, having worked in my Western Australia to fund his earlier racing career. Genius, great money for hard work, and it got him going. Inspirational interview, Peter. Thank you very much. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, Derek's new autobiography is out. It's called Serial whatever, Serial something, Recovery whatever, Survivor. And he talks a lot about those early days of funding it all. And whenever I think of Derek doing that in Australia, I think David Kennedy was out there with him too. Whenever I think of those guys in Western Australia doing that and earning enough money to go back and race Formula Ford and get into Formula 3, I also always think of James Hunt, because James did dig holes in the road in Fulham to fund his Formula Ford as well. Okay, he didn't go to Western Australia, but he was doing it in the rain in Fulham. Amazing, eh? Love it. Catan Dragon Prix. I was almost Piastri's karting rival in Australia. Well, that's good to know. Good. Let's have some pictures of you blowing off Piastri in the odd race or two. Excellent. Diego Moreno says, "Go Peter." Well, this is the great Diego of the Brabham BT19 and the onboard lap of Madring, please. Diego. Q. Herbert Williams. Q. Diego, as always, many thanks. Such a great show. Savage Duggal. By fur, I meant Ferrari, Peter. Ferrari have done this with their engine deliberate. Sorry for the confusion. Oh, okay. So we think Ferrari have done all that stuff. Ah, okay. I think okay. So that's Ferrari doing all that. Well, we'll see. You know, there's lots talked about Ferrari and how they're going to be affected by the compression ratio change, and whether or not that's going to hurt them. So we'll see. You know, I don't know. We'll see. All I can say is we'll see. Right. Another. Right. Gonna go back. Oof, lots of points. Hendrik Grimberg. Sir, I will thank you for everything you did for the sport. Love the time that you worked for Speed TV. Big fan of your work. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. That's very kind. Very kind. Love that time with Speed as well. Herbert says, which Formula One is the best blend of knack and pilot? What do I mean by knack? I'm not quite sure what you mean. Do you mean just a driver that has the knack of driving well, and pilot being a sort of guy that thinks like a aircraft pilot in terms of digits? Probably be this one, if that is what you mean. It'd probably be this one, be the one that requires the most from both of those two skills. Ronnie says, somehow when Max is feeling his natural instincts after the recent tweaks and Red Bull upgrades, it's better for the show, a bit like seeing Bryson DeChambeau bombing the fairways in one drive. Yeah, it is. It's a natural thing. And seeing Max do what he does, as well as he does, was a real pleasure. And it was actually quite gut wrenching, I think, to see Max not able to do very much with the car in those first three races. But now he is starting to do things, and he's starting to discover areas where he can do things differently from everybody else as well. I think we'll see that in the upcoming races. McLaren says PHJV4IK. McLaren also doesn't seem to prioritise titles over the drivers. I can't see Max going there, even if it would be epic as a fan of both. Yeah, I don't know. It may seem that way. I still think McLaren. Yeah, okay. If the Wizard of Oz came down tomorrow and said to Zach, "You're only going to win one championship this year, Zach. It's going to be either the constructors or the drivers. Which do you want?" Probably he would say the constructors. You're probably right. I may be wrong there, but he might say that. But if for whatever reason Max did go to McLaren, Zach would know for sure that that Max is there to win the drivers' championship. He's not there to help McLaren win the manufacturers' championship, and you'd go along with that. Although there's no point in having Max Verstappen in the car. Is Max happy with Ford? Well, I've seen him looking a bit. He's done a couple of Ford videos. He looks quite happy in those videos, doesn't he? I don't think any of the shortcomings, this is only my opinion, but I don't think any of the shortcomings that Red Bull have at the moment, post Miami, relative to Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, are in any way the fault of Ford. Partly car, power unit, maybe some stuff in there, but ultimately it's more, if there is a power unit drama, it'll be more Red Bull powertrain than Ford. So I think, I think it's not. I think he's happy with Ford, probably. Has he got one of those Raptor pickup truck things, do you think? Like Martin says? Drives that around, Genk, with his cart in the back? Why not? If Lessis, I think you mean Lewis went to Haas, would he win a race? I don't think Lewis. I mean, if the Haas was capable of winning a Grand Prix in terms of pace, longevity over the race, reliability, etc., and Oliver Behrman was in the other car, would Lewis beat him? I'll let you guys answer that question. Oliver Behrman is not slow. Could Kimi come back? I think you mean Kimi Raikkonen on this occasion. I don't think so, no. I think he's too involved with Robin's career now, isn't he? Managing Robin. Robin, what do you do now? Go, fast, win race. I don't think he'll come back, no, not this time. He's had too many comebacks, Kimi. Connor Clark. Hi, Peter. Was at Derek Daly book signing in Mondello Park at the weekend. Seen two people in front of me mention they watched your interview to Derek. Oh, brilliant. Good. That's good. That's very nice to know. And I'd love to know, Connor, if you can send another message, what it was like at Mondello watching him drive those cars. Tamako Road, he's replying to Wood and Lewis winning a Haas. He's saying he's had a hard enough, tough enough time winning in a Ferrari, let alone a Haas. That's quite a good answer, actually. Very good. Right. I'm going to the Nürburgring this weekend, says Connor. Wow. Any corners you recommend watching from? Well, it's a long time ago, but my favourite place was always Flansgarten on the outside, just as they're taking off at Flansgarten and landing. I don't know if you can get there now as a spectator. I don't think there are any spectators. I think I was lucky enough to have an armband then, and I could just get out and get where I wanted to go. But that's where I always watched from at the Nürburgring, was Flansgarten. You see the cars for quite a long time too. You see them airborne, and then you see them. I don't know if they get airborne. They probably don't anymore, but they were airborne then, and then they go to that fast right-hander, and you hear them for minutes before they get there, which is great. So going down through Wipperman, oof, shivers down the spine. Herbert says, if Kimi wins the next race, he is the favourite for the championship. Well, I would imagine so, yeah. Well, then you really need to think, what is George going to do now? You know, come on, George. 2015 Toro Rosso was not a bad car. Absolutely right. Do you think George has the mentality to fight back if Kimi has another win in Canada? Oh, yeah, definitely. George, I think, is pretty strong mentally, very strong. Whether he has the technique is a much bigger question. He definitely has the tenacity, but is he going to be able to out Kimi in the slow corners, even at Silverstone, you know, that twiddly bit after turn 1 and 2, or at the end of the first long straight at Silverstone. Kimi's going to be really quick just there. That'll give him a good run onto the old pit straight. Yeah, George will be good through Copse. Yeah, George will be good through Beckett's. But all the other twiddly stuff also coming back down towards the end of the lap. Kimi will be good there too. So there's Silverstone. Hungary, a lot of slow corners there. I'm not saying Kimi can't drive medium fast, but he's better than George on slow. That's the point. And, you know, that's it. So there we are. Japan, let's go back to Japan. Lando didn't have any practice there. Yeah, didn't have a lot of practice, did he? Had that drama. Yeah, possibly. I just think Oscar was very good there, though. I'm not sure Lando would have beaten him even if he'd had a proper run. Might have. So there you go. Jose Carrera. Did you watch Portugal rally? I think Pahari took big step forwards and it was his best rally easily. Yeah, he was consistently quick, wasn't he? And suddenly Ollie looked a little bit caught in the headlights, having had that big moment that we showed in the video. And Pahari, I think, has woken up at how well Ollie's been driving, and he's lifted his game. He's definitely had, apart from that big moment, which kind of defined the rally for him. I think it's, you know, it's a big moment for him. Has Max won in GT3? Yeah, but he then got disqualified, didn't he, or penalised or something? So there you go. Henry says, I still miss Eddie Jordan. Yeah, well, we're all going to miss Eddie. We all miss Eddie, and we'll miss him more and more as time goes on. I miss so many people, so many friends. I was just talking to Jack the other day, you know, sadly in motorsport, we lose so many, or in my era, we lost so many guys of my age racing. And so, you know, I get to be the age I am now, and I miss them all so much. There's very few of them around now, sadly. Warlen 007 says, at the beginning of the season, people said no one wants Max anymore. Now the performance between the teams is a lot tighter. They're fighting for Max again. Yeah, well, it's, you know, all this business, who's the favourite, who's doing well. It's all so short term with a lot of this internet stuff. And, you know, better to just focus on your own thing, make your own observations, own judgments of who's doing what. And my only real regret on those first 3 races is that it was very, very difficult to see the real Max, because he couldn't do anything. For the first time in his career, he couldn't really do anything in a bad car. And that's what I didn't like about those first 3 races. Now things have changed a little bit. We can start to see Max being Max again. And it's not because I'm a huge Max fan. It's just that he is the gold standard of driving technique around which we can base our judgment of everything else. And it was the same with Charles. You know, Charles in that ridiculous Chinese Grand Prix where he was penalised for actually going quicker. You know, ridiculous in terms of lap time. Peter, general request for your race day reviews. Could you add an intro so that sound connections and levels can be set? Yeah, kind of. I listen to, as I say, I listen to a podcast, and I'm always incredibly irritated when they always begin with some sort of intro and then, you know, make sure you follow me, like me, all that rubbish. I just like to get straight into it. And surely if the volume is a little bit lower than you would normally have for another one, you just turn up the volume a little bit, because you know it's going to be the same for the rest of the video. Equally, if it's a bit higher, the same thing applies. I know you could set it if I did do an intro. Maybe I will, I don't know. Maybe I'll say welcome to the Canadian Grand Prix. I don't know. It always sounds a little bit contrived if I do that. I don't know why. I actually, you know, to be honest with you, I have the volume set. I've got a white marker on the volume and it's absolutely the same. The only thing that changes is my distance from the mic from time to time when I move my head. So I can't really do much more than that, I think. I adjust them when it comes into, when I do the podcast version, try to make them all the same there. Probably doesn't work out, but I do my best. Jez James, I hear that if the new V8 Formula One series goes ahead, they will be turbo with minimal hybrid. Could this mean the sound won't be loud, flame spit like the turbos of the 80s and more like the turbos of today? I think it will anyway, for other reasons. I asked somebody about that. It was Mark was saying about that. He doesn't think with the modern technology and everything else they've got, whether it's the fuels or this or that, I don't think we'll ever get that same sound again. And don't forget, this is only a pipe dream at the moment. It's got a long way to go before we go back to V8s in 2030. It's all very well for the president of the FIA to talk about it, but that's not the decision-making process. A lot of people who don't want to go that way are going to have to change their minds, by which I mean Liberty and the teams to some extent who are ruled by car companies and so forth. Tamakaro, wasn't it the sore back from crashing in an IndyCar that made it less enjoyable for Mansell? Did he really not like Mario? He and Mario never really got on. Mario thought he was a bit yeah, self-centered, I suppose is the right word, which he is. Nigel, I say that he's one of my best friends sort of way, but he wouldn't be Nigel Mansell if he wasn't very self-centered. But he's also a very kind person, a very kind and good person, but he's self-centered. Whereas Mario is much more rounded than Nigel. And Nigel sometimes would keep, I don't know. I mean, I don't really want to go into that, but they didn't get on. And they didn't get on really because went back to 1980. Nigel, it wasn't in any way vindictive, but it didn't start well in 1980 when Mario tested the Lotus 81B after the German Grand Prix at Hockenheim, and the next race was the Austrian Grand Prix, knowing that that car was going to be raced as a third car by Nigel. And Mario didn't want Lotus to be running three cars. They wanted them to focus on him and Elio. And B, he didn't really know who Nigel was, I think. So he just thought, what is this all about? So he tested that car at Hockenheim on the Monday. And this is as Nigel understands the situation. The feedback was, it's a really good car, great car, good, great way to go. And so Colin was quite fired up. And Nigel drove the car. And in lap one, realized it was a complete and utter dog with total understeer everywhere, totally undrivable. And, Mario thought that was quite funny, I think. Classic Mario. And I don't think Nigel ever really got over that. Julian Thursday. Yesterday, I watched a podcast with Pino Allievi, great Italian journalist, where Aldo Costa was the guest. When they asked him about Adrian Newey, he made almost the exact same point you did months ago on your podcast. Can't remember. And then it's a colon, but then I can't see your next. Oh, what the hell is he doing at Honda's factory in Japan in November? It is too late. Yeah, well, yeah, well done, Aldo, who's a good man, and I think is now at Dallara, I think. Good man, as is, of course, Gianpaolo Dallara, the original GP, the great GP. And yeah, Adrian Newey wearing an Aston Martin cap at Monaco, and he doesn't realize that Honda have got a problem until 6 months later. Why wasn't he flying directly to Narita after Monaco, straight to Japan, absolutely paranoid that the same thing might happen that happened with McLaren and Honda when they got back together, that Honda in Japan might be left to their own devices, particularly as this is such a new engine, and they need to be spoon-fed and watched absolutely minute by minute, and Aston Martin need to set up their own division in Japan right next to Honda just to bring engineers into it as well, as indeed Honda do when they come to work with a British team in England. Why didn't Adrian do that? Where did he go after Monaco? Oh, back to England. Why? Ronnie Way, Peter, you're very human, hopefully, and passionate about motorsport. You're very knowledgeable, and we're lucky to have you sharing what you've done through it. Thank you very much. Very kind. Move on to the next one. Thank you, Peter. Chances that Team Verstappen can win the Nürburgring 24 hours? Anything can go wrong in 24 hours. Yeah, I'm a bit nervous about it all because A, it's the Nürburgring, and B, it's all about speed differential for me, these races. 24 hours, darkness as well, big drama. So I just hope everybody's safe. That's all I want out of this. I know Max will have fun, and all things being equal, no issues. Of course they'll blitz it, no doubt about it. great drivers there as well. Danny Juncadella is a good friend. I've followed his career right from day one. You see all the videos I've done with him over the years. And the good drivers there. Max, brilliant, obviously. But it is a 24-hour race with a lot of slow drivers and cars doing funny things and stopping in weird places. And it's a very, very difficult circuit to marshal. So I don't want to think about it too much, actually. I'm quite happy to look at it after the race, as I said. Glenn Sequeira says, hi, Peter. Seb Loeb also tried getting into Formula One in '09 with Toro Rosso. Red Bull was denied a super license. How times have changed. It's pathetic, isn't it? And, when I was doing USF1, when it was still a great thing that I felt would have been very, very good, and Max was on the phone, Max Mosley, saying, this is brilliant, Peter. We'll keep a slot open for you in the Concord Agreement, and wonderful to have that team in Formula One. This was indeed '09. I got a phone call from Sebastian Loeb saying he'd love to be involved. And I said, well, I would love you to be involved. Let's do it. Kyle Busch was another that rang. Could we see BMW return to Formula One in 31? They're doing all right in WEC now. They won at Spa, didn't they, at the weekend with my mate Robin Frins. Good to see him getting his just desserts. I know he's been around a long time and had some very good results over the years, but he was a real talent for me, Robin Frins, and he should have been in Formula One as well. And nice that he's got this at the back end of his career. BMW return to Formula One. Well, maybe, but this could be. This is one of the dramas, isn't it? Because if we're talking about 2030, and we're talking about maybe going back to internal combustion engines, as the FIA president's been talking about, and you mix that with, will BMW come back? Will Toyota come back? You then open up all the doors. But would BMW want to come back if they've just invested another 75 trillion on electric cars? I'm only making this up. Would they want to come back to a full ICE Formula One? Oh no, we better make sure we've got a lot of electrification so we can get BMW in. And that's when things start going wrong, when you start shaping Formula One in order to get a car company back into the sport. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. My view, the lesson from everything we're going through in 26 is from now on, we don't regulate and draw up regulations of Formula One in order to induce car companies to come into it. We do what is best for the sport, best for the show. And if big car companies want to be a part of that show, brilliant. If not, there'll be other big sponsors that do, because it'll be it'll be 10 times bigger TV show than it is now. That's my view. And I know I'm extrapolating your question to go on a bit of a rant, but maybe not. I don't know. I can't say. It would depend a little bit, I say, on what they're investing all their money in at that point. I mean, if anybody is going to be coming into an internal combustion engine Formula One, it may well be BMW. Good luck to them. Might even be Toyota as well, for that matter. Kelvin Jacobs. Hi, Peter. Have you ever seen a driver become a real short corner driver during his career? I mean, consciously change his style for the better? No, not really. No, I can't think of a very good short corner driver who wasn't that way from day one. Well, Kimi Antonelli a little bit on medium and fast corners now. You're seeing him start to do what he could never do, maybe in the sim or whatever it was that he always felt into slow corners that made him as good as he was out of the box. He was never really doing that at high speed, and now he is. So whether he's worked at that or whether it's just the confidence of winning races that's just taken him to that next level, I mean, that's not a bad example. I mean, Peter Revson, but then I don't really know how Peter drove before I really got to know him in 72, 73, but he was definitely quite short cornerish, 72, 73, 74. But, usually they are what they are, and they don't really change. Very good point from Richard Garthwaite, talking about careers before Formula One. Jackie Stewart, clay pigeon, absolutely Olympic standard clay pigeon. There he was. Long before he was a pro racing driver, he was great clay pigeon shot. Very good thing. All to do with eyesight, to do with timing, because it's timing with the rhythm of the breathing and the holding of the thing of the rifle, and reflexes as well. Clay pigeon is reflexes. So yeah, very, very good example. Wolf's Wanderings. Keep up the great work, Peter. Please warm my ears with a random thought of the great Jim Clark. Really enjoyed listening to talk about the past greats. Yeah, random thought about Jim Clark. There's a great video of Jimmy in a Lotus Cortina. If you Google it on YouTube, well, YouTube it, and it's obviously I don't know what it's made for. It's from local Scottish TV news thing, I think. But he drives into Duns in this road-going Lotus Cortina, and gets out of the car with quite a big briefcase. And I'm thinking, what's he actually doing there? Why has he got this briefcase? And I'm assuming he's going to the bank or something like that. And I just random thought about Jim Clark. He was often carrying quite a big briefcase everywhere he went. Lots of stuff in there. Love to have known what was in there. I once saw his bank book because he left it behind. He left it in Australia every year because he opened a bank account in Sydney for his prize money during the Tasman series. And sadly, when he passed away in '68, it was still there, obviously. And when I came to England, Jeff Sykes of Warwick Farm gave me the bank book and said, "Look, will you give this to Jimmy's sisters, or one of his sisters, when you see them?" Which I did. And it was, but I couldn't resist opening it, of course. And it was so funny to see, entries of X $1,000 on this date, and it would be the Monday after the, whatever international it was, for about 3 years. Jimmy in his briefcase. Yeah. Anyway, Lewis says the Ferrari simulator doesn't work. Well, I think that's kind of, why is that not coming up? Sorry. Oh, there it is, I think. Yeah. I think that's a bit of an old one, isn't it? Because we're trying to work out what he actually would have said or did say. And for some reason it's got stuck on that. Let's have a look. No, it doesn't. It's there now. Good. And we don't know what he was talking about there. Does he mean the simulator that allows him to play around with the deployment and the harvesting? Or does he mean the simulator that allows him to try and shorten his corners? Or what? But then we do know that he got to Miami and he said whatever he had been working on didn't work. But what didn't work? And why is he thinking it would work when it's all about touch and feel anyway? Why does he care? It's not that important, is it? It's only important if it's a part of, the systems of operation of the car. And he's operating the car quite well. He's just not, technique-wise, not as quick as Charles. But he's never going to close that gap on a simulator. Never. Kelvin Jacobs. Hi, Peter. No, I didn't catch this. Did you catch Max driving a Super GT car in Fuji? He beat a Super GT driver's lap time on his second lap in the wet by almost 2 seconds. They're quite quick too, all those Japanese Super GT drivers. It's a big category of racing, isn't it? It's huge. Max is just amazing at Fuji. Have you seen the video? Another Jim Clark random thought. Have you seen the video out there of Jimmy going to Fuji in '66? Prior to the Indy race they run later that year. And he goes out effectively to review the circuit on behalf of the international drivers. And he's greeted at the airport with a red carpet and comes down the Boeing 707 steps and onto the red carpet, and he's greeted and taken off. And then he drives around the circuit, meets all the marshals. He doesn't drive around the circuit, actually. He's driven around the circuit in an E-Type Jaguar by a guy with a beard. And I mentioned that because, in closer inspection, the guy with the beard turns out to be Don Nichols, who went on to start the Shadow Formula One team and Can-Am teams. And the reason that he was there delegated to look after Jimmy in '66 was because Don Nichols, the back half of his career working for the CIA, was stationed in Japan and spoke fluent Japanese. And then Jimmy gets into some sort of Japanese Formula Honda car wearing a marshal's helmet and drives off and does a lap, misses a gear, accelerating out of the pit lane. Jim Clark misses gear. Headline news. Forlorn Squad. Hi, Peter. Ronnie Peterson is known as one of the fastest drivers in the history of the sport. You watched him firsthand. How quick was he and in what style? Oh, massive oversteer, wide turn in, late breaker, straight line braking. And if the variables were thrown at him, had a problem. It definitely, lost the 73 British Grand Prix. I was talking about Revson earlier. That's where Revy won that race. Just shorter corners, the oil went down, track grip changed. Ronnie had a massive moment, backed away a little bit like Oscar and Lando in qualifying in Miami, and Revy just went through, adjusted a little bit, manipulated the car, and won the race. And yeah, but Ronnie I don't know if I mentioned, it's a great Formula 3 video just come out of Ronnie, Tim Schenken, Charlie Lucas, all racing at Cadwell Park, Formula 3, 69, and James Hunt at the beginning of his F3 career. He and Ronnie have quite a big battle, actually. And it's interesting to see there, Ronnie, even then, Ronnie's having his first race ever in the March 693. And you can see him sliding like this. And James Hunt's a lot more linear in the way he's driving. Tim Schenken, unbelievably quick that day. Really good. Ronnie, yeah, that was Ronnie. Just very oversteery, very soft and fluid, very Gilles Villeneuve like, actually, in the way he drove. Lovely to watch him. Ronnie, I remember watching Ronnie, actually 73 Woodcote in qualifying. Incredible drifts through Woodcote, the British Grand Prix. And then one of the great moments of my viewing career in Formula One, Monaco, early Monaco, Thursday morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, outside of Casino Square on the barrier, Ronnie in the Lotus 72, sideways as he comes into view, and then just not hitting the barrier, just that far from the barrier, the left rear coming all the way down the hill, moves a little bit for the bump and then into Mirabeau. And it was early morning at Monaco, fresh, crisp air, the Cosworth engine. Oh, beautiful. There's a picture I found the other day, very odd picture. It must have been taken by my photographer at Autocar. And after practice for the 78 Italian Grand Prix at Monza, I did my, well, not a usual thing, but often I went to the car park where the drivers would sort of a couple of hours after practice, I'd sort of stand by. I knew whatever car they were in. And Mario, as ever, had a Achille Motors Rolls Royce and was driving up to Villa d'Este, where he was staying. And Ronnie was going with him. And I went there and I got to the car park, and Mario hadn't arrived and Deanne wasn't there. But Ronnie had the boot up of the roller and was sitting in the boot with his knees up under his chin, and was just, I don't know what he was doing, reading Autosport, I think. Anyway, I went up and said, "Oh, hi, Ronnie." And we started to chat about the 79 McLaren, because he'd already signed for McLaren, and how that car was looking so good, and it was going to be a Lotus 79 on steroids. It was going to disappear, and wasn't it going to be brilliant? And he's looking forward to that so much. And anyway, Ron Easton, when Mario arrived, Ron Easton, my photographer, obviously thought, "Oh, that's Mario Andretti," and because I was going to give Ron a lift back to the hotel in my car, obviously, and he saw Mario there, and he took a picture, and there's a picture of Mario, Ronnie sitting in the thing, and you can just see half of my face, sort of talking to Ronnie still. And I only mentioned that because, of course, that was the day before Ronnie died, and I only found that photograph the other day. It's pure chance that I'm even in a little bit of the frame, and it's so sad when I think of Ronnie and how happy he was at that moment at Monza on the Saturday night, thinking about 79. Great guy. Really love Ronnie. Got on with him very well. Did an interview with him once in his home. He was very into fish. He had a big aquarium, and he found it very relaxing just to sit in the living room watching the fish in the aquarium. Moving in the water pretty much as Ronnie moved a racing car. The insane engineering in Arrow is still really cool. Well, yeah, it is. It is cool. But is Formula One an engineering exercise, or is it a show and a race? Hi, Peter. How do you see the future of Oscar Piastri in the next 5 years? Um, I mean, the guy's very talented. We shouldn't forget how good he is. I think more than anything, any race in his career so far, actually, Miami was the most disappointing race he's had in his entire career. Because last year, when he was getting blown away by Lando, you could sort of understand a little bit of what was going on. It was the friction there, and then the Singapore thing, and he felt Lando had barged through and should have given him the position back, and all the sort of stuff that comes under the heading of intra-team rivalry and when you're both fighting for the championship. But here, this one, you know, he had a good race in Japan, and he comes to Miami and allows himself to get blown away by Lando. That to me is the first time I've a little bit of a question about Oscar Piastri, because that should not have happened, and he needs to bounce back straight away in order to redress the balance there if he's going to be, you know, going to win championships and be the driver that he looks as if he was always going to be. For me, 89, 94 were the golden years of the Formula One real drivers in real cars, says Diamond Dog. Great name, by the way. Dexter's no longer here, but I no doubt he would approve of that. Yeah, you know, very good. The active Williams. I mean, 94 obviously was a bit of a funny year because Ayrton's accident and the whole Hockenheim agreement of 1993, in which Bernie basically ran up and down the Formula One paddock in Germany, banning everything he could think of. And that's what we have for 94. Wasn't a fan of the 94 cars, to be honest, but 93 cars with the 92 cars watered down a little bit. The 92 car was the greatest Grand Prix car of all time, really, and technically advanced car, the Williams FW14B. 89, yeah, you know, Ferrari, McLaren, John Barnard, paddle shifts, all happening then, wasn't it? All that technology. And a lot of great drivers, particularly N. Mansell, A. Senna, A. Prost. Internet cars on, that's just a different category. Oh, say G. Berger, you can put in there too. Daniel Brodsky. Why sometimes drivers go close to the wall at the end of the qualifying lap in Suzuka, for example, instead of going wide as is usual. Mexico the same. Oh, just trying to think. Mexico. Do they? After Mexico, surely they're running as close as they can to that wall on the left, aren't they? And they're going over the start-finish line? Or do they come back that way? I mean, as a general rule, it's quicker not to move the steering wheel. Cars go best in a straight line. So you always want to have, if you're coming out of a corner like the last corner in China, you want to stay absolutely dead straight out of that last corner as you cross the start finish line and not move the car at all. Because as soon as you move the car a fraction, there's a little bit of G load going through the engine and revs will be lost. So that a driver using his brain will know that. And drivers who don't use their brains and constantly think of lining up for the next corner as soon as possible pay the price. And they probably don't adapt that even when they're qualifying. So that's all I can say, really. Connor Clark, is there a way to send you photos from this weekend Nürburgring? Yeah, there is, Connor. On the description below this video, you'll see contact us at, and there's a YouTube, there's an email address there, and it's Peter Windsor YT, as in YouTube, Peter Windsor YT, one word, at gmail.com. Send them there, and I'd be I'd be delighted to receive those. Thank you. Bring back the 90s cars, but add halos. Yeah, halos, I think, is a good thing. And whatever we do, I think we should always have halos. Totally agree. Yeah. Flimico. Hi, Peter. Greetings from Switzerland. Love all your streams. My question is your opinion, who is the most gifted natural Formula One driver in history? Thank you. Jim Clark. Yeah, got to say it. Got to say Jim Clark. James Clark Jr., as his real name was. Could drive anything. Lovely person. Totally fascinated by racing cars and cars in general. Not really interested in money or glory or fame. In fact, didn't like any of it. And was blindingly quick in every type of condition, every type of car. End of story. Paulo Souza. FU3L, here's another super chat. Thank you very much, Paolo. Ferrari should go all in for Max. Blank check, complete freedom, plus GT3 and hypercar program so he can race whatever he wants outside Formula One. Well, it'd be great for the sport, wouldn't it? Be lovely to see. And yeah, I mean, I always said that if they'd taken Adrian Newey and allowed him to set up his own infrastructure there, then I think that would have been a better investment than swapping Carlos Sainz for Lewis Hamilton. And don't forget that if Ferrari are in a slump and they don't have a great car, he's not going to be able to do much more than Charles Leclerc can do with that car, if anything, really. So there's no point for Max to go to Ferrari unless he's pretty confident they're going to have a quick car. Right now, Red Bull, in the space of 4 races, have actually made that car just about as quick as a Ferrari, haven't they? So we'll see there. But I can imagine how all that other stuff is appealing to Max. GT3, WEC, the whole thing. Indy, maybe. Take him back to Indy. So Danny Rick drives those Raptors, does he? Does he race them or does he just drive them, I wonder? But yeah, they're good, aren't they, those Raptors? I was talking to Jack about that the other day, saying I know Dexter would love to sit in the back of a Raptor. But the only thing about pickup trucks, which I've never really understood, is that they're fairly difficult things to operate, aren't they? Because whatever's in the back can be easily nicked when you're going to the movies or whatever. And then everything gets wet and you've got to cover it all up. So what's the point? Anyway, I quite like the idea of me and you and a dog named Boo, you know, doing a road trip with the dog in the back of the pickup truck, looking in the mirror and you waving to the dog. It's quite a cool image. Did I ever tell you the time I was sitting in a coffee shop near the Bibendum Michelin building in Chelsea, London, looking out the window, and I suddenly saw Anthony Hopkins walking past, the actor. So me being me, I went straight out to him and said, "Oh, sorry to disturb you and interrupt you. I just wanted to say I've read a really good article that you did the other day about how when you finished a movie in the States, you tend to like to switch off completely and just drive east. And you love to rent old 60s, you know, American cars and stay in seedy motels that just happen to appear on the way. And you like to do this for a couple of weeks. And I just wanted to say, I think that's one of the coolest things I've ever read." He said, "Oh yeah, yeah, that's exactly what I do. And I couldn't live my life as an actor without it. Thank you very much for saying that." And kept walking. Raptors. I doubt he'd go to Raptor actually, but yeah, Anthony Hopkins. It's a little bit weird talking to him because you always feel a little bit like, you know. Anyway, let's go back to this young Drake. He can't even win in a Ferrari. No, he's not winning in a Haas. What kind of question is that? Lol. This is about could Lewis win in a Haas? Peter, I'd love to ask you about Scarbs, about the Lotus 80 from 79. I love the shape without wings. Was the Lotus 80 essentially the correct design if they hadn't been porpoising and sticking cut skirts? Well, you know, I was around then at Lotus, obviously, because I was with Carlos. And when Colin was talking to Carlos about the Lotus 80, it was always, you know, you think the 79 is good. Wait till the 80. It's a 79 with full-length skirts. So what downforce we got in the middle, we've now got front to rear. It's unbelievable. And Carlos would say, but the skirt is curved. Is curved, Colin? Or no, it's straight skirt. No, it's curved, you know. And Carlos is on the train back from Norwich thinking, look, saying to me, how they do this with the curved skirt. I know, I understand this. Anyway, he was quite right to hit on that because it never worked. They always kept jamming. And it was the first episode of porpoising, wasn't it? And when Mario was talking about it, yeah, man, it's porpoising. Bouncing up and down, I can't see where I'm going. They actually, it was the first onboard camera, I think. They put this camera on Mario's car, testing at Silverstone, and you could see the front of the car coming up off the ground, going down Hanger Straight. Now you believe me, eh, guys? And yeah, and they just couldn't get the skirts. The skirts were too complicated in length and shape ever to be. I mean, think about how difficult it was for the teams to get a straight skirt to sit comfortably on the road for the entire Grand Prix distance and sliding up and down beautifully over bumps and curbs. multiply that by, I don't know what, 10,000, because you're suddenly doing it with curves. And that's what the 80 was all about. So yeah, in theory, the 80 was a good car in that sense. It was a sound idea, but in practice, it was an impossible idea because the skirts never worked. And when Ligier lost their pace in 79, when the Williams started to really go well and the Ligiers went off the boil, it was purely because they couldn't get the skirts to stay down on the Ligier, and because they were getting chassis flex on the Ligier chassis, and that was starting to affect the way the skirts moved up and down, and their skirts started jamming, and you get a bit of rubber inside the slides and things like that. And whereas Williams had a very rigid chassis, and the skirts were the most effective skirts in Formula One. Super ferocious. Ninja Warrior. Peter, could you have persisted more with USF1? Is there an argument to the effect that you pulled the plug too soon? Could you have? No, we couldn't have. It wasn't anything other than the fact that we were given an absurd deadline that we had to meet, and it was impossible to meet it once we got signed into the Concord Agreement. And Bernie and Max had done this thing about a budget cap championship and a separate championship to the existing Formula One and all that rubbish. By the time we got in, we had 6 months. They wouldn't give us another year to set up the factory, the car, and the team. We had everything in place, and that was the problem. We're not given that time. Haas were given that time. Cadillac had been given that time. We were not given that time because Bernie and Max had set up this thing around our idea, which they then called budget cap. What do they call it? Budget cap championship or something like that. Yeah, something ridiculous. And there were sort of seven or eight other teams which had never even thought about doing Formula One that suddenly thought, oh well, if we can do a team for 30 million, we'll be in too. And all these other teams came along out of the water, and so he said, well, if you're not in it, we've got 6 other people that will take your place. And so we had to say, well, we can't do it. So that's it. So there's no way. And of all the things, I've always said, of all the things that you list in your mind when you're out walking the dog that can go wrong when you're doing a new Formula One team, the one thing you never ever put in there, or I didn't, was Bernie and Max suddenly deciding they would do a new type of Formula One called budget cap, and that this would be open to new teams, and we would suddenly have to build a team, a factory, a car, a team in 6 months. Would you ever put that on your list of things that could go wrong? I didn't. I had maybe the drivers are no good, maybe the car's no good, maybe we'll crash and burn in the first race, maybe you won't have enough money, all the things that you would normally consider. But that's what happened that year. What can I say? Danny Bart 9955. How do you think races are best viewed for newer fans actually to learn and understand the sport? Typically, I watch certain drivers' onboards and keep the broadcast stream more in the background. Yeah, I think you do the right thing. I think the problem that the new fans have at the moment is the lack of information on screen of what we're watching. Is the driver harvesting at that point? Is he deploying? And in practice, what power is he using anyway? All those things that the team say, oh no, it's private information. The Concord Agreement says, sorry, mate, that's going on the screen. Because if we don't tell the fans what they're watching, we won't have a show and you won't even be competing anyway. That's what should be happening. We should have much more information. That's what I would say. Truth, Kip. Hi, Peter. Just watched Lewis 07 pole in China. My, it was magnificent. 6 tenths ahead of Alonso, 1.5 tenths to Kimi, 4 tenths to Massa. His steering inputs were very precise from the onboards. Yeah, just fabulous. Who was it? Jolyon Palmer said he was at his peak then and then went off the boil after 07. I think he said something like that, or that's what he was quoted as saying. It's unlikely, really, for Jolyon to say that. But he was super good in 07. It was just a joy to watch. He was brilliant in 06 in Formula 2, let alone in 07 in Formula 1. So, yeah, I mean, I remember in Canada, really, that pole lap in Canada. Just absolutely brilliant braking for the hairpin, the high-speed braking of Lewis compared with Fernando. Just amazing. And then he blew it in the race, didn't he? Coming into the pits. Oh, that's another story in China. Willie Vanderbeek. Hi, Peter. Love your show and your knowledge. Thank you very much. Is it true that Ayrton Senna came close to sign Ferrari in 91, signed a pre-contract, but Ferrari president Fusaro blocked it? Mm. 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 I don't know. I know he definitely signed some sort of pre-contract with Ferrari at some point, as did Nigel before he raced there. I'm talking about a different period of time altogether. And because I hadn't spoken about that, he spoke about that, didn't he, before he passed away? But I'm not sure exactly what happened. Maybe it was when uh, it's more likely to have been when McLaren was struggling with engines, and more likely to possibly be 92, I think, but I may be wrong. I don't know is my answer to that. But what I would say is that in the previous live stream, we got a question about Jean Alesi and his Ferrari contract and why he didn't drive for Williams in 91. And I said, I didn't know that either. And I said, as far as I knew in my life at that time, Nigel was always insistent on Riccardo Patrese being the other driver. And that's actually, I said, Johnny Williams would know. So I rang Johnny Williams about it, or he rang and we chatted about it. And Johnny doesn't know either, really. He knows, he said, really only Frank would know the answer to that, because it's a very odd thing. As I said, I felt there was some sort of swap deal involved, because Williams ended up getting a Ferrari 693 Formula One car out of the whole deal. And Johnny confirmed that did happen. And he said, I think there was some cash as well. But it's bizarre, isn't it? Because if Williams had had a contract with a lazy, they would have had to have broken that contract for Patrese to drive for them. So why is it Ferrari had to then pay Williams to run a lazy? The whole thing is very confusing, and nobody really seems to know the answer now. If Johnny doesn't know, I don't think anybody will know now. And John just kept saying, oh, well, I could have. I don't know what John does say now. I think he says, Williams never came back to me. I had an option with them. They never came back to me, so I signed for Ferrari. The other thing that is clear is that Patrick Head wanted Ricciardo, because he felt that that was a sort of constant thread of development, whereas going with going with John Alesi would have been a new thing. So, yeah, that was that. But Michele Alboreto was in there as well. That was another thing. Michele Alboreto was going to be potentially the Williams driver in '89, and instead of Terry Boutsen. And Count Gugi Zanon, who actually was very close to Ronnie and Lella Lombardi, and used to buy Cosworth engines for Ronnie and Lella to go racing with. And indeed, when Ronnie went to Lotus, he went with a couple of free engines from Gugi Zanon. That was one of the attractions for Colin. I think Colin would have signed Ronnie anyway, but he brought free engines with him as well, which was a really good thing. 3 engines, I think. And Zanon was also very close to Frank, and I think probably owned a couple of Frank's engines as well. And he was pushing a lot for Michele. He was very close to Michele. And that was when Patrick said, I don't want Alboreto. I want Terry Boots and Ricciardo. So I think it would have been Boots and Alboreto. And as a result of that, Gugi and Frank fell out, kind of. Gugi felt very let down after all the support that Frank hadn't run Alboreto. Yeah, funny times, weren't they? Retro Gamer says, thanks for this, Peter. I'm currently working in the Philippines, Manila, after 2 long days there. This is just what the doctor ordered. Good to hear. I've got good memories of Philippines, Manila, of karting there. And I don't know whether it still exists. Quite a good kart track, and going back and chilling out with Matthew Marsh and Brian Saunders and a few others after karting all day. Love it. Waterboy, Peter, love the chat. Thank you. Sorry, noise pollution not allowed at some circuits. Flatlander. Yeah, well, that's another thing, isn't it? They say that Barcelona, actually, I'm not sure it's the case they have to do it anymore with the noise, but there was a case up until when the Formula One was noisy. Barcelona had to pay, the Barcelona Catalunya Formula One track had to pay the local council, and thus the local farmers, a lot of money. We're talking several millions, purely because of the damage done to livestock because of the noise of the racing cars. Damage the moo cows and the milk they produced, I think, is basically what happened. Willem van der Beek. Peter, And of course, that was the other thing, going back to the pollution thing. That's the other thing that was the end of Brands Hatch, because it was there was so many towns nearby, and then there was the M3, whatever it was, that was built, and the sound thing became a big issue at Brands as well, annoyingly. Willem van der Beek, Peter, what are your thoughts on this hypothesis? Lewis retires and Max moves to Ferrari. Uh, as I said, I can see Max loving the whole WEC GT3 thing. Whether he would actually enjoy being in a Ferrari Formula One team with Charles Leclerc in the other car, I'm not so sure about. He would do it under sufferance, but it would go against everything that he's done and has done up until now in terms of everything he's enjoyed in Formula One. Really, always having teammates that he can manage. Charles would be a different deal. I'm not sure he would do that. He would probably do it with Lewis, I think, no problem at all. But I'm not sure he would do it with Charles. Be nice if he did. I think we'd all love to see it, wouldn't we? But I just can't imagine he would. Robert Sky for why Formula One is missing the joy it had. Why is it a special? Why is it a skeptical now, bringing back the close racing? Yeah, I know. I would love to have the close racing in the show, and I speak as a purist. I say that because we purists are getting branded as the people that wanted all the normally they get branded into wanting all the electric stuff because we're purists. We love the engineering, but we don't. I want the show. Flatlander, looking forward to hearing your shows. Have any thoughts on BYD joining Formula One? No, but I've had a few nightmares about it, and I'd rather not go into it. Serial Survivor, yeah, there you go. I got it right in the end. Derek Daly's new book. Team Kimi Leclerc. Well, there you go. There's a good team. Hi, Peter. The current Formula One theme music should have changed with these new 26 regulations. Surely they need to change the theme in 31. What are your thoughts? Always love the early 2000 themes. Yeah. I think the theme for this music should be, for this year, this era, should be Sting singing Fragile. For 30, yeah, we can go back to something, a bit more buoyant. But yeah, we need to be a bit sort of sensitive and worried about the history of Formula One this year. So Fragile would be perfect. Emerald Isle says, Sir Lewis away with the ferry sometimes, really? I think he's still pretty much there, isn't he? He's still a racer. He wants to get to Canada and get on with it. Bring on the rain. Benjamin Rick Donaldson, how do you remember Spain 16 watching Max come in and win and the Mercedes taking each other out? I think I saw you on the Formula One YouTube page there. Yeah, I was watching down in the last part of the lap, just mesmerized actually by Max's rhythm and his replication of what he was doing, lap after lap after lap, exactly the same bit of curb, exactly the same turn-in point, which it was difficult to see because his transitions were so smooth. And I just felt, wow, this is the beginning of a new era. That was what I remember from that day. Yeah, the Mercs. Spoke to Lewis about that a while ago, and he said, in retrospect, he probably would have given Nico a fraction more room, I think. Fraction. So yeah. Flimico, another one. I always dreamt of being a racing driver. I got into karting in my 20s and I've done some races, but I soon realized it was not a sport for normal people. We lose many talented individuals. Yeah, it's a difficult sport, isn't it? And like anything, you've really got to do it from a very young age, even if you're, engineering or mechanic, whatever, all these things. If you start young, that's going to help you on the path to Formula One. Obviously, driving goes on, and I would suggest karting in your 20s, probably a bit late, really, to have had the right view of it and of what it could give you as a sport. But there are lots of old timers racing now, aren't there? Most of them with a lot of money in WEC and other championships, as we're seeing, and that's okay. And there's classic racing as well. But the young guys, the very good young ones, you got to start very, very young. Max Flashout. Hey, Peter and chat. I got no notification if you were going live. I have all the bell things on. Redone them. Oh, sorry about that. Don't know what happened there. Did my best. Here's another super chat. from Paulo Souza. Thank you very much. Charles Leclerc has said that Carlos Sainz Jr. was especially strong at low grip tracks, particularly in qualifying. Yep, I'd buy that. He's always been, quite often, I would say, particularly when in untimed first practice, he's always been quite good on low grip tracks. Russia aside, when he had that massive shunt in the Toro Rosso. But yeah, low grip track, he's all about opposite lock and sliding and doing it really well. And that's not the way George Russell drives, which is probably why he struggles so much on a low grip track. George tries to drive as he drives when he's got grip, and that's always a problem. One of the problems Carlos has is that when he has high grip, he doesn't then progress into a Charles Leclerc mode. Carlos is very good in low grip tracks. I'd buy that 100%. Diamond Dog, still Peter, I could listen to you all day. Well, that's very kind, thank you. Turbocharged 777. Hi Peter, do short corner drivers tend to use more curb at the apex or exit and get the car straight quicker? Short corner drivers in general try not to use any more curb than they have to use in order for it to be the corner. The one thing they never want to do is destabilize the car, because as I said earlier, a car is traveling at its fastest when the wheels are pointing straight. So what you want to do is get out of your head any thought of the transition to rotation being anything other than the moment of greatest downside, and you're minimizing that point. There's some point when you've got to turn that wheel and rotate the car, but let's do that when there's the least possible downside. Whereas a longer corner driver will use that rotation point as a moment when he's starting to get on the power and start to feel the load, generally speaking. And that's the difference. Minimum speed for a short corner driver is not important. It's just that they know it's going to be slow. They know it's the downside. But what they're looking for is for the car to be more or less straight, big rotation, slow speed, more or less straight on exit. And it's not more, and when I say more or less, it's obviously it's turning the wheel with full power on, but you're then starting to come off slightly from the throttle. You're loading up the steering a bit more. Then you're starting to brake against that steering load very, very gradually, and then hard, but not so hard that you got understeer. Then you're balancing. It's that moment, it's that critical moment going into the corner. And none of that involves curb, of course. And yes, I'm at the transition point, lowest point of minimum downside. If you can take a bit of apex curb, great. But then once you've done your transition, the car's straight, and all you're doing is just aiming for that straight exit. All you want is a straight exit, and you'll be brushing the exit of the wall. Not brushing it. You'll be a nanomillimeter away from it. So there's a lot of talk about curbs in Formula One, and a lot of it is related to drivers who are not short corner drivers. It's related to drivers who are straight lining a corner in order to make the corner shorter. And of course, if that is faster than doing what a short corner driver can do, he will have to do that as well. It's one of the downsides. But in general, a short corner driver will want to use less curb. What do you think of the Dorian pin test of Mercedes? Some say the ladies can't do Formula One because of neck strength. Easiest now with lift and coast from Miami. I don't think there's ever been a time when it's easier and more appropriate for women to be driving Formula One cars, because it's a more systematic formula right now. I'm not being patronizing here, but women multitasking and doing these things, women usually are very good airline pilots and bus drivers and all these things they're doing. They do it very well usually because they do multitask and they keep a clear head. This is a very big generalization, obviously. And yeah, neck strength, I don't think is a problem. I think women can build up all the muscles they need to drive a Formula One car now. And I think the one discriminating difference between men and women in Formula One that I always felt was there somewhere in the background, I don't think exists anymore. And that is that if there's a seventh gear blind corner with an opening between two grandstands on the left where there's always sort of propensity for crosswind, but you can take it flat if you get it absolutely right we're talking seventh gear here. We're talking very high speed, over 160 miles an hour. I think women, and I hope I'm not saying the wrong thing. I think women have a sort of natural tendency to build in a bit of margin just to make sure that they do get it right. Whereas there are men who will just be flat. If they know that corner will be flat, they'll be flat and they'll deal with the crosswind. And I think that's, to me, that's only ever been the issue between men and women. And I don't think that sort of corner and situation really exists in Formula One anyway anymore. I can't think of anywhere where you could say that now, particularly in these new regs. So I think I'm surprised more teams aren't running more women and looking to run a woman quite seriously, because I think there's a lot out there with a lot of talent and they could all do very well. Or some of them could do very well in the right team. Josh Geese, is Lewis going to retire at Silverstone? Oh, what a thing that would be. Imagine if he plans to retire at Silverstone because things aren't going very well, and Charles got the better of him and he's just not really enjoying it anymore. Then Silverstone comes along and he's already decided to retire, and they got the T-shirts made and everything else. And he starts P6, and it's one of those races which is wet, dry, wet, dry. And Lewis Hamilton, unbelievably, carves his way through the field and wins the race, taking the lead on the last lap. Keep the T-shirts in the box, please. Yeah, that's the trouble with that one. Peter, would you consider doing a live stream for qualifying? It would be great to comment on the drivers taking short corners, etc. Yeah, could do. I mean, more likely to see, I mean, qualifying, you don't get to see that much, do you? Because it's quite short, sharp bursts and they're always focusing on one or two cars and then a few incidents that happen. In a way, it'd be more logical, I suppose, to try and do something on a Friday morning or afternoon. I'll have a think about that. Josh says Max won't go anywhere but Mercedes or McLaren. Oh, really? Not going to go to Ferrari now? Okay. Or maybe he'll stay at Red Bull, I suppose. Yeah. Ben says, I see Hamilton retire, but do it at McLaren for 2 years and stop where he got his start. Maybe. Josh says McLaren have the strongest driver lineup, I think. I think they're probably locked in there for a couple of years. Truth Kip, you need to bring back your homepage, YouTube, intro video. It was very poetic. Which was that then? I used to do intros. I just thought, nah, this is all a bit silly. I'll have a look. I'll have a listen. Max says, I will watch the last 2 hours when you post it, Peter. Okay, all right. Morning from New York, says Orkan Stars. Peter, is it weird that I'm more excited for the GT 24-hour race this weekend than I am for Canada? Sure, I love Max, but I also think my love for Formula One has diminished this year. No, it's not weird, because we've often been saying, wouldn't it be nice to see Formula One drivers in all sorts of different cars? And I made the point that right now, to get his confidence back, Isaac Hadjar, I know he's doing some demo stuff in a town somewhere, but France, I think, but it would be better for Isaac Hadjar to be racing and actually having some fun and racing something that he has fun with. Like Max, that's what he needs to be doing to get back into the groove of where he was and what he lost in Miami. And we'd love to see Charles Leclerc driving these cars. Love to see Lewis in something. What's wrong with him? Why isn't Lando out there doing the 4th round of the Spanish Rally Championship? Let's go and have some fun. But they don't. But anyway, that's why we're all looking forward to the Nürburgring. John Atherton. Peter, what memories do you have of Formula One drivers in road cars? Techniques, eccentricities surprised you? We talked about this quite a lot in the previous live stream. Eccentricities, that's a good one, isn't it? Carlos Reutemann always used to put his stuff in the top of the shelf below the windscreen, whether he just bought some baguettes in the local store or 3 different newspapers, which he used to read papers all day. Whatever it was, it would always be there on the top there. And then it would all slide around. He would just look and not really worry about it. No, let's think about Nigel Mansell eccentricities in a road car. Well, I mean, the most eccentric thing Nigel ever did was rescue 2 swans from his local golf club when when it was clear that they were going to build a new clubhouse and the whole pond was going to be covered over, he rescued two swans and actually put them in the boot of his car and drove them home. It wasn't very far, and they got out and they were okay. They jumped out. So yeah, that was that. I've driven with a lot of drivers. I should have a few more eccentricities, shouldn't I? Let me think about it. Mario, what was he like? Very, very smooth Mario. Talked a lot without, seemingly driving the car at all. It was like having dinner with Mario when he was driving the car. It was just like, oh yeah, man. Yeah. Like Nicky, massive peripheral vision, I suppose. They just know what's going on all the time, but they don't need to spend that much time worrying about it. Sterling Moss, unbelievable judgment for reverse parking, and could just do it like, one like that, just perfect, that far from the curb, never touched the curb, never needed a second go, absolutely perfect judgment. Even then, and this is a Sterling long since retired. Andrea De Cesaris, driving a golf buggy over the green to get to the next hole. You didn't know what, you weren't allowed to do that. Watkins Glen, not impressive. I don't know. We're going nowhere with this, are we? Let's get on the next one. It's a good question, but, my brain's starting to tire. What is it? Nearly 2:00. Come on. Come on, guys. Steve still plays games. Peter, you're Formula One royalty to me. Oh, thank you very much. Did you ever meet Patrick Depailler? A friend told me he was a real daredevil and loved dangerous sport. Was this true? Thank you. Yeah, I knew Patrick very well. He's a very good friend. And I knew him very closely right up from his first Formula One race through, dare I say, to the very sad day we lost him in that test accident at Hockenheim. And we often used to talk on the phone. Lovely guy, very like Kimi Räikkönen in that he could balance a bicycle without, even wobbling for a long period of time, just with both feet on the pedal. Very, very good like that. Very good sense of humor. Smoked Gaulois cigarettes like crazy. Just laughed all the time. I said a lot of laughs with Patrick Depailler. I was always a fan. Loved his helmet designs. Don't know. Just did he love? I never got the feeling that he loved dangerous sports. I know he did that hang gliding thing, and he had the accident. But I suppose at the time we never really thought about dangerous sports. They were just things people did all the time anyway. Back then. But looking back now, yeah, I guess it's quite a dangerous thing for a Formula One driver to do. But any more dangerous than Michael wanting to do his skydiving, which he did. Or Mario's done some skydiving. Yeah, and I never saw him in my mind as a dangerous sports car, but he was from Clermont-Ferrand, and he that's where he went hang gliding, and that's where he had the shunts. So updraft, hit the wall. Great guy, great loss, very quick, fingertippy driver, bit like Carlos Sainz the way he drove, I think. Very, very good. Extreme says, hi, Mr. Windsor, I think sprint weekends should be scrapped. I agree. IMO, there isn't enough time for car setup. I think we should judge all upgrades post-sprint weekends. Yeah, I agree. I think they're pointless anyway, to be honest. I just don't see the attraction of them. Watching Grand Prix car go around a circuit is great anyway, and we need to see it more. And the sprint racing is all a bit childish, I think. Turbocharged 777. Adding to the previous question, what are the visual indicators that you use to tell if a driver is driving shorter corners, and what corners show short corners the best? Well, you just see how a driver looks. If he's on his own, the one thing you'd look at straight away is the seamless. He'll for sure have a seamless transition from traveling in a straight line to initiating the initial steering input. Whereas you'll see drivers doing that and that, but a driver who's a Max or a Charles will do that. So that's the first thing you look for. And Alex Albon will do that, but he'll do a bit later. And you start, if there's nobody there when they're out, you can look at the point at which he's starting to do that. And then when somebody else is out, you can look at the marking on the curb to see when they're starting to move as well. And generally speaking, a short corner driver will be further away from the curb and will be starting to turn a little bit earlier. But then extending the straight as he's doing so. So it's not an indication of who's braking latest. And then and you look at minimum speeds. Generally, low minimum speed is a good thing, and so you'll pick something up from that. But it's generally just watching how they are compared with other cars, and there's never a moment of sort of vicious turning with back end movement. That you'll see a moment when it is the moment of least downside to rotate the car, but even that will be very soft. It'll be like that. I'm thinking in my head Kimi at Rascasse now, and how good he was compared with, say, Montoya there going into Rascasse, and how much earlier Kimi went. And Montoya, when Kimi was still like that with the steering, Montoya, who had turned in later, was like that at the same part of the road, asking much more of the car with a much longer corner, whereas Kimi was still basically hadn't even got to the corner, and then he would just do a very like that, and then he would just be dead straight coming out. Everything's rhythmic. That's another thing you can notice, is the rhythmic motion and the timing and the tempo of the actual moment of rotation, and the speed at which they turn the wheel. Benjamin says, Lewis is never going to retire before Alonso. Do you think those two are thinking about it? No, you first. FIA should be, Ronnie says, FIA should be proud that Max is trying out other types of motorsport, promoting them. It's pure racing. Many thanks. Deeply appreciate your reflections. Thank you very much. I think we're near the end of this. I'm not going to scroll anymore because hopefully it is the end, because I'm getting a bit knackered. Emerald Isle, Lando drove at the Nürburgring in a McLaren 750S, said he had fun, not full racing, unfortunately. Yeah, exactly. Of course he'd have fun. Why wouldn't he? And that's the problem, isn't it? It's all out there to be done. And why not do a race? Do you know of any Formula One drivers in the last 10, 15 years that used to smoke? Well, what's 15 years from here? That's 1990, is it? 90 to 2000. No, not. It's 2000. No, it's more. It's 2010. 2010, is it? I don't know. 2010. 2010? No. Don't know of any drivers that smoked 2010. Carlos used to smoke a little bit, not much. Occasionally, obviously Keke Rosberg, James Hunt, the aforementioned Patrick Depailler. Elio, did Elio smoke? I don't know, I can't remember. But no, not since 2010. I can't think of anybody that smoked 2010, maybe surreptitiously. Hadjar and all the French greats with it. Okay, that was when he did that demo. That was good. It might have restored his faith in himself, I think, maybe. Eric Verne, smoking. Okay, Jean-Eric Verne. There you go. He's quite a cool guy, Jean-Eric Verne, isn't he? Yeah, actually, I remember now. I did an interview with him when he was in Formula. Oh, he's probably still in Formula E. And he was smoking then when we had lunch. Yeah, good point. Great stream. Thank you very much, Max. Jules Mac. I'm sure some drivers have done more than smoke on that kind of money. Who was the biggest party animal you ever met on that circuit, Peter? Rupert Keegan, I would think, was probably the best. Maybe Ulf Norrinder, not that he was a Formula One driver, but Rupert Keegan was pretty good at partying and, being late for practice as a result, famously with the Surtees at Zandvoort. James, obviously. And James, pretty much perfect driver for Marlboro, because his chosen cigarette was Marlboro anyway. So he was, that was Tobacco City with James. But he did it well. It was like, right, it looked like a real Spitfire pilot thing, which was good. Thanks, Sir Peter Windsor. Yeah, right. Willem Vanderberg. I missed some European Grand Prix on the Formula One calendar. Hockenheim, Ricard. Also think it would be a mistake to leave out Spa. Yeah, I mean, in general, we want a German Grand Prix, please, and we want a French Grand Prix. And then we'll talk about the circuits. And, yeah, German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring, I think, is the right thing. And a French Grand Prix at Ricard would be fine. Manicure, maybe. Smoke the competition. Looks like smoking in Formula went away with the tobacco sponsors. Ha ha. But I'd like to make the point that in all this world of living cleanly, and aren't we helping the universe and everything, we have at least 2 tobacco companies in Formula One promoting their vapes. I don't know what people think about that, but I think for all the people that used to moan and complain about cigarette advertising in Formula One, why is it that McLaren and Ferrari can promote vapes? BAT and Philip Morris, please advise. Thank you, says Willem. And I say thank you to everybody for being a part of it. I was talking to Jack about the show yesterday, actually. and he was saying, it's how cool it is, the word he used, that we can do a show just based on your input and your questions and comments, and it goes from there. And it's a really nice thing. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And we'll be back obviously next week. Might even be before then. I don't know. We'll do some stuff. Brain's a bit addled right now, but we'll do some stuff. Certainly in the build up to Canada, and then we'll look at the Canadian Grand Prix as well. So big thanks to RSE Watches, TrackNinja, to Jetcraft and OEM Exclusive for their support as well of this channel, and you, the viewer. Take care and enjoy the Nürburgring this weekend.